You do that with footballers, like he said about Leeds. I've kept really quiet, but I'll tell you something. He went down in my estimation when he said that. We have not resorted to that, but I'll tell you, you can tell him now, be watching it, we're still fighting for this title, and he's got to go to Middlesbrough and get something. And I'll tell you, honestly, I will love it if we beat them. Love it.
Townsend right in there. Houghton also making his presence felt. There's his shot. It's a goal for Ireland. The goalkeeper caught badly out of position. And
Maradona turns like a little eel and comes away from trouble. Little squat man comes inside Budger, leaves him for dead. Outside Fennick leaves him for dead and puts the ball away. And that is why Maradona is the greatest player in the world. He buried the English defence. He picked up that ball 40 yards out. First he left one man for dead. First he went past Saxon. It's a goal of great quality by a player of the greatest quality. It's England 0, Argentina 2.
good ball by Dixon, finding Smith. For Thomas, charging through the midfield. Thomas, it's up for grabs now. Thomas, right at the end. An unbelievable climax to the league season.
You ever gentle on my mind. It's
everything they've entered this season, they have won.
Right. Hi everyone, welcome back to the channel, and thanks for joining me today. And I'm really delighted to say I've got Niall here from the upper tier. He's a massive Liverpool fan and massive football fan in general, really. And he's got a brilliant YouTube channel, and I'm going to let him introduce himself to you and tell you all about that and what he does on his channel for the get-go. So do you want to get started now?
Yeah, absolutely. It's the upper tier on YouTube and across all the other socials and Spotify and all the audio, and everywhere you look for the upper tier. If it's Liverpool is your interest, it's the Shankly Sessions, named after the great man. And we cover everything. We do match previews, we do match reactions and player ratings. We do specials on previous players. We do previews for the Premier League every week, the Champions League. We cover the draws live. We do literally anything to do with football is on there. And we also cover a bit of pro wrestling now as well on the channel as well, my other love. But we do all that on the channel. So anything football in the morning time, we're doing morning shows now, either called the morning drive or the morning brew, depending on how my day is fixed that day. And various other things, just updating on the transfers and any football news and everything else. Anything that's kind of breaking and stuff like that, you'll find on the channel. I upload a litany of shorts at times, giving my opinion on various singular kind of things and stuff like that. And we do a mix of recorded shows and live shows as well. We always do a great show on a Monday, similar to your brilliant Saturday show, where people can come on and we chat about review the results of the weekend. And on the Thursday, we do the previews. And for my sins this year, I'll have to change the Thursday show because now I have to cover that beautiful Europa League on a Thursday now for my sins. My team letting me down badly last season. So we'll have to move that around a bit. So there you go. So that's it, yeah. Anything football and pro wrestling you'll find there.
Yeah, because Niall does these brilliant shorts as well, and he puts out like breaking news stories, like Jordan Henderson going to Saudi Arabia, and he gets people to put in their opinions about the news story and whatnot, which I really like. And then also you do a review on preview for every Premier League match day, don't you?
Every I do previews and match reactions and player ratings for all the Liverpool games. I don't do watch-alongs at the moment because I know they're pretty cool for channels and they do really, really well for people view-wise and stuff like that. But I do kind of find it weird that people would want to look at people looking at football. That's kind of strange to me. It doesn't make sense. Plus, I actually really enjoy watching football. I'm not sure whether my match reactions would be, my instant reactions during games would be for the faint-hearted, to be honest. So you're better off not seeing them, to be honest. If my match reactions are out in the goal, boy, you can imagine my instant match reactions during matches and stuff like that would be just turned up a little notch more.
Exactly, because I remember last season, as the season wore on, they started to get more and more agitated.
Animated.
Exactly, that's what I'm looking for.
I have a high expectation of my team, let's say, and when it lets me down, I don't be too happy.
But so you should do, because they're the most successful club in England.
Yeah. I walked that 30-year road to Damascus. I don't fancy doing it again. I ain't doing it again. So now I have a voice, and I have a screen, and I have a mic to voice my opinion, which I never had during those 30 years. So we shall see.
I mean, the fact that you never won a league title for 30 years and you still remained being England's most successful football club, despite that, I just find it unbelievable. It just shows you how successful they were in days gone by.
Absolutely, yeah. It shows that football does really truly move in cycles, doesn't it? And you can see the way history and the patterns repeat themselves and stuff like that. And that's my fear at the moment. So if you've watched any of my Liverpool shows during the summer in the off season, I'm not letting my club or my manager or my squad or my owners off the hook, because I can see what's unfolding, and I'm fearful that I'm at the start of another 30-year walk, and I don't know whether I have another 30 years in me to wait for another title. So they need to fix up and get it sorted.
Exactly. So no, can we go back to the very beginning for you, and can I ask you where you were born and where you grew up?
Yeah, I was born in Dublin. I was born in a very famous hospital called Holles Street. There's only two real maternity hospitals here. There's Holles Street and the Coombe. And Holles Street, my father was from Dublin inner city. My mother was from the suburbs, and they met at a dance, as they did back then. My dad was a bit of a driver. He was fond of the old whiskey and stuff like that. So he was a bit of a dancer, and he impressed my mum. And we grew up in a place called Kilmacud, Stillorgan, which is just outside Dublin City. My eldest sister is 10 years older than me, because my mum lost a couple of babies, and she lost 2 sets of twins, and then she had me. So there's about 10 years between myself and my older sister. And then I have a younger sister who came along as well, who was born on Christmas Day, and there's 3 years between me and herself. So that's kind of family history background.
No, that's interesting, and it's sad to hear about what happened with your mum and your family with the loss of those children, because it happened in my family as well when I was. Yeah. I don't remember it because it happened before I was born, obviously, but it's awful.
Yeah, from what I heard back then, it seemed to be a regular thing that people just tended to miscarriage or lose babies during pregnancy back then. My mum obviously was a smoker, so. That obviously didn't help either, and stuff like that, you know. So, yeah.
And back then, probably people weren't necessarily as aware as the damages that smoking could do, wasn't it? No.
Absolutely, yeah, absolutely, yeah.
So how did your interest in football get started, Niall?
Well, I sort of levitated. Football was huge for me in my life as a kid. My dad actually. My dad played for a team called Ormond Celtic, and if any historians out there listen shall know the story behind that. Ormond Celtic was managed by Johnny Giles' dad, and Johnny Giles played for Ormond Celtic. So he played football with my dad back in the day. And when Gilesy was going over for trials, when he was heading over to United and stuff like that, my dad had actually secured trials for Everton, believe it or not. And about 3 months before the end of the season, and he was heading over for the trials, he got taken out and his ankle got smashed in 3 places. And if you think about medical research and advances back then, it wasn't what it is now. So if you had a double break or a triple break in a body part, that's it, you were kind of done. It nearly had to kind of set and heal itself, really. So that paved way to the end of my dad's potential football career, if there was one. And I kind of look back now and I go, thank God he didn't go playing for Everton. Can you imagine that? Like, that could have changed the course of history totally. But yeah, his ankle got smashed in 3 places, never repaired, and he complained about his ankle until the day he passed away, basically. And that was it. So he was always very fond of Giles as well. He loved Giles, his tenacity and stuff like that. And Ormond Celtic, they were a tough old bunch. The history of my dad's family, really, my dad's family were coal merchants in Dublin. So they used to have their horses and carts delivering the coal all around the city and into the suburbs and all. And back in the late 50s, early 60s, my grandfather Hogan, who I never got to meet, unfortunately, came into a bit of money. And at the time, he could have bought various properties around Dublin, relatively cheap, that are now worth gazillions now at this stage. And instead of buying property, what he did was he went down and he bought a load of draft horses and carts to expand the coal business. So hindsight is a great thing. If I had a DeLorean and Doc Brown now, I could go back and fix history. But there you go. There's a little story. But yeah, that's it. My dad was he was a big fan. My dad then very much became an armchair sportsman then. I often describe my dad as being the man who sat in the chair, who had the greatest shot, the greatest save, the greatest defending. He had the greatest golf shot into a green. And I often remember sitting at home with him watching. He's not with us anymore, obviously, or my mum. So I always remember sitting at home with him watching sports. And he'd often go in hard on players and all for things that they did if they didn't shape up and stuff like that. And he'd, if you're watching golf on the telly, we always watch like the British Open that's on at the moment. The coverage on BBC and UTV was always brilliant. And he'd always be shouting at the screen if they played a bad shot. What the hell did you do that for and stuff and all? And he loved a bit of golf as well, but he didn't like actually golfing. He liked going to the driving range and just blasting balls out of sight with a driver and stuff like that and all. He was a big man, you know. He was quite a big man. He was about 6 foot, but he 6'1", 6 foot, but he died about 5'8" because you obviously shrink over time and stuff that. But he was always a big stocky man and loved a few beers and all that kind of stuff, and very fond of the whiskey and stuff like that. But he ended up having to give that up. He had a massive heart attack when he was 45, no less, in the middle of a chemist, in the middle of a pharmacy, and they resuscitated him and he survived. And from that day on, he never had another drink again. Wow. But he was borderline up to he was about 45, 46. You could argue he was an alcoholic, because he used to drink bottles of whiskey for fun, and the usual, you'd find him down. He'd be lying down on the carpet in the front room watching telly, and you'd find him there sometimes asleep and stuff like that and all. And just that heart attack happened one day, and he just turned around and he said he'd never drink again. He never did. He was a big. He was fond of the 7-Up then. He used to have a nice 7-Up with a slice of lemon, and that was it, which was a huge difference from where he was.
Yeah. Wow. Yeah, he's a fair play to him for like staying off it. You know, that must have been really hard. I'm sure he must have been tempted. Do you know what I mean? And to resist that temptation, that's massive thing, you know? Yeah. So fair play to him. So how old were you when you first got interested in football, Niall, do you think?
My earliest recollection is probably 76, 77, when my dad brought me out one day. I was a big Liverpool fan. I was influenced by neighbours. Of course, back then we used to play street football, and we'd use the gates, the driveway gates as goals and stuff like that. And many a ball was put through a window and various things like that those days. And my sister used to live at home at that stage, and she was a hostess in a club, and she also worked in a jeweler's, so she was quite glamorous. So she used to drive like sporty cars, like you remember the old Fiat Ritmos. Remember the Fiat Ritmos and stuff like that? Quite sporty, like. And she used to park the car out on the road, and we'd be hopping the ball off the car, of course, playing football and all, the car be in the way, and she'd be coming out screaming at us and stuff like that. But I was heavily influenced. There was 2 twin brothers lived across the road from me, the McGarveys, and they were older than me. Used to play football with them all the time. Pat was a big Arsenal man, funny enough, actually, and he was a lunatic because he was a goalkeeper, because all goalkeepers are lunatics. You have to be a lunatic to be a goalkeeper. And Gary was kind of fancied himself as a 9 or a striker. And Gary followed Liverpool, and I just thought there was nothing as cool as Liverpool Football Club, because I always thought Gary was a great footballer, so I was quite influenced by him as well. So I followed Liverpool, and we played football on the street. But I remember, I think it was 77. My dad got me by the hand one day, and he brought me down to a sports shop, and they were selling the kits. And if you remember wearing the old kits, this will jog your memory. They used to sell them, remember, in the clear bags, and you'd get the jersey, the shorts, and the socks, and it all come in the little clear bag. They call them sandwich bags now, believe it or not, but that's the size they were. And I remember getting my first kit and putting it on, and I was just, I just felt unbelievable. You know what I mean? Just to have your first kit with your shorts and your socks and stuff like that. There's no feeling like it. It's like when people describe their first day of their holiday, going to the airport, and the excitement. It was that kind of excitement. But I always follow Liverpool. I've always followed Liverpool through my my joy and my pain and my suffering and everything else in between. Good times, bad times, brilliant moments, tragic moments, all that kind of stuff. So I always have followed Liverpool Football Club. But that's kind of where it started. 76, 77 that season. I was a massive fan of Ray Clements. They did a program for him when he passed away, and that program is up there on the wall there. So I have it there. I was a huge fan of Ray Clements at the time, and I was a big lad going through school as well. So I always kind of played at the back or played in goals. I played in goals for GAA as well, because I was a big enough lad. So I was always way bigger than the age group, because I was quite stocky and rounded. Contrary to what people believe, that if your mother smokes, they have small babies. It didn't happen with this kid, that's for sure. But that's an old wives' tale. Anyone who believes that, certainly didn't happen in our family anyway.
So did you play GAA? Did you say?
Yeah, I would have played Gaelic, and I would have played hurling in school and stuff like that, and all. And I would have played football. Then I played football for Mount Marion for a while, and I played a bit of football for Benildes. But I always played central defence, and that was when central defence basically never left the 18-yard line.
Yeah.
There was none of this high line messing or any of that. And the odd time they used to send me up for corners, and then I'd get back into defence basically by about the second half and stuff like that. And then one day they had an idea to put me out on the wing. And I made 3 runs, and I just waved over. 2 of them, they didn't even play the ball to me. The third one, they played the ball to me. I slung in a lovely cross, actually, from the wing, and your man scored with a beautiful header. And then I just waved at the manager and said, "Here, put me back in defence. I can't move." I was gassed after about 3 runs. So that was the end of that. And then I was playing in goal one day. I was standing goalkeeper one day for the team. And I had a great game. Just everything that they shot hit off me, or I blocked it or deflected it or whatever it is. And your man said, "You're a very, very good goalkeeper," and stuff like that. And then they wanted me to play goals in GAA. And I played goals in GAA, and then that was really it. Then after that, it was mainly goalkeeping. I loved it.
They wanted you to play goal for hurling.
Yeah, I played in goal for hurling as well. I also played out for hurling as well, but that's
You're actually mad to go in goal for hurling. I've seen the way that those balls fly in.
Well, you want to try and play outfield as well, because back then there was just like it was crazy, like getting hurls to the ribs and all. I remember I played outfield one time for Kilmacook Crokes, I think, for a tournament, and I took a hurley after 10 minutes straight to the midsection and the ribs, and I literally couldn't move. And when I got home, I was having a shower, and I remember taking off the top. And like there was just this band around me, just like this bruised band around the front of me. Like that bruising you'd say on someone in a car crash from the seatbelt. Your man just gave me the hurley full force straight through the midsection. Yeah.
Like I've got a funny story to tell you. I don't know if you know this. The Del Boys ever told you, but I love Aussie rules.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And we start in the late 80s. We got a league in the UK, right? And I hooked up with this Australian team in South London, and I was going to play for them, right? So they invited me along to watch them playing a game, right? So I went along to this game, and it was played on like a cricket pitch because they have to play on an oval, right? When I got there was an ambulance with the doors open on the side of the pitch. Right? And I said to this fella, I said, why is there an ambulance over there? He said, well, because, and there was two of them actually. He said, the reason is because we get so many people getting injured that we have to cart them backwards and forwards to the hospital. And I said, right, okay, yeah, okay. And I never saw the fella again. I never went back. I was thinking, there is no way I'm doing this.
Yeah, that's a good story actually. When I was in secondary school, I think I was in third year, so it would have been 87, 88. NFL was huge. NFL was on the rise at the time. And they were starting an NFL schools league here. And I said, I'll give that a pop as well. Sure. Slapping a few lads around and hitting them hard and stuff. That sounds right up my street. And we were playing in the school. We used to play matches after school and stuff like that, just a bit of crack. And we ended up going and doing, I was asked to go and do trials for I think they were called the Dublin Rebels at the time. They were in the Phoenix Park. And the Phoenix Park from my house at the time was probably about, it was a good 15, 16 mile away, maybe further even. And we used to cycle to it, you know, like, because back then, like, you'd never turn around and ask your parents, you wouldn't give us a lift. Now, if Aldi is 5 minutes away, they drive their kids to it and stuff like that. We used to cycle everywhere. Mountain bikes, BMXs, skateboards, whatever it was. We used to make our own way around, and you go out in the morning time, come back in the evening time to have your bit of dinner, and that's how they knew you were kind of alive, you know. It wasn't like now the way parenting is and stuff, you know. Literally showering you and drying you after your shower and all sorts of stuff, you know. But we went that day to do the trials, and I was pumped up for this. I was going, this is great, American football. And when we got there, they had all the gear, because we were literally just playing. We'd no pads or anything. Like, we were just flying by the side of our backside. So they had all the, you know, the proper shoulder pads and the kit and the whole lot and all. And I put this on. I said, this is great. I'll be able to hop off, lads, here. So they put me in the center. You know, the guy who snaps the ball back to the quarterback.
Yeah.
And we did a few practices and stuff like that, a few warm-ups and stretching, bit of running, all that kind of stuff. And then we started off, we said we'd have a practice match. They wanted to take a look at us. And I was in defense at the time, so I was in the center of defense, and your man was right in front of me who snaps the ball. And we both jumped up. He snapped the ball, and we both jumped up. And I jumped up, and I just smashed my face straight off his forehead. And my nose just went right across my face. There was blood everywhere, like a volcano. And that was the end of my trial with the Dublin Rebels. And I wasn't brought anywhere. Now, my nose was like, I'm amazed how my nose is now compared to what it was that day. And I ended up having to cycle home and all 15 miles. I was covered in blood. The nose was smashed to bits. And I got home, and my dad said, did you get into a row? What happened? And I explained to him what happened. And he went, you're an awful legion, aren't you? Will you go in there and have your dinner and go up to bed? That was that. You know what I mean? Now you'd be queuing for 3 hours in the local VHI or Bupa clinic or whatever it is, and your nose would be getting reset, and they'd be clipping your nails and all sorts of stuff. You know what I mean?
Exactly.
It's all changed now. So that was my one kind of little career in American football that went totally down.
Mate, it sounds crazy.
Yeah.
So growing up in Dublin, being a Liverpool fan, I can imagine. I know that there's loads of Liverpool fans in Dublin, as there are United. Yeah. So, what was it like living in Dublin and being a Liverpool fan? Or
it was great until the 90s. It was great because we were quite successful. Of course, it got difficult, of course, with Heysel and, of course, Hillsborough, of course. Rest in peace, all those people and all and stuff like that. So those were really tough times. I remember that day, and we'll probably get into it, but I remember that day watching it and stuff like that. That was so tough. But yeah, no, it was great. It was great being a Liverpool fan, and the banter was great, and it was great as well because there was a big connection there with Liverpool and with Ireland and stuff like that. There was Irish players around the teams, and so it was kind of cool. So you got to watch them playing for Ireland. You got to see them coming through for Liverpool, and so there was a great connection there. And I often say it now, like when I go over to Liverpool, there's loads of areas in Liverpool that are named the exact same as areas in Dublin. And it's so interesting. So it really is for me like a home away from home at times when I go over there. And I like the way that the people of Liverpool, there's a certain connection with them that they're quite They remind me a lot of my mother, where they're very hospitable and stuff like that, and they're very friendly and all that kind of stuff. My mum always operated an open door policy, and there was always a pot of tea in the middle of the table. And I always get that feeling when I used to go over to Liverpool and stuff like that, that's the way it was and stuff like that. They were very welcoming. And that's why it breaks my heart when I listen to the crap I have to listen to this season about whether you're a real fan or not a real fan, because you don't live 20 yards from Anfield, and you don't go to matches every week, and you don't own the local corner shop in Liverpool, and they call you whether you're a fan or not and stuff like that. And it just, when I see fan bases going like that, that breaks my heart and stuff. When I think about what I grew up on and stuff like that, how Liverpool, remember so many Irish people during the dark times in the 70s and the 80s and all travelled over to Liverpool to work the docks and all that kind of stuff. And also there's a huge connection there between Liverpool and Dublin, So yeah, so it was always going to be the case.
So what I like about the people from Liverpool is the humour.
Yeah,
they're the funniest people in the whole of the UK, as far as I'm concerned. They're just so funny, right?
Yeah.
It's so, and it gets to a point where you're just like, okay, it's enough. I'm tired. I'm drained by this, But one of my mum's best friends, God rest her soul, she was from Liverpool, right? And they worked together in the hospital. And when they had a new patient come into the ward, she'd go up to the person and say, yeah, my name's Doreen. I'm from Liverpool. I'm from the capital of Ireland.
Yeah. No surprise there at all. Yeah.
And that was just what her humour was like. She was like that all the time, and it was brilliant. And I love it. No, I really do. I think it's great, and So, when you were growing up, what would you say is your first memory of watching Liverpool? Can you remember the first game you saw them playing?
Probably not. I don't recollect it. I know my original memory would be the 76-77 season and stuff like that, because that was when I really got my first kit and stuff like that. But I don't remember. I vaguely recollect, because at that stage I think I was only 6. So I vaguely recollect kind of games. I know they always had great games against Leeds, and there was great games against Arsenal and all. And I don't think United. I don't think, if I'm right, I don't think United at the time were as much a powerhouse and stuff like that. So they never really factored into the equation. I always remember being around people that followed Leeds, and because there was always a big connection between Leeds and Ireland as well, with Gilesy and stuff like that, But I always remember there'd be Leeds fans. I know. Hey, funny enough, you say it. I actually went to school with them. I went to school with lads, and they followed Ipswich, and they followed Luton, and they followed all these different teams. It was weird. There was I think there was 3 of us, or 4 of us in the class that followed Liverpool. But there was such a splattering. Like there was fans of Luton, there was fans of Ipswich, so many other teams. There was a Sheffield Wednesday fan, I think. So many different fans. Arsenal, of course, and Leeds. But they're my recollections. But I can't. I can't recollect that first match that I watched, because I was so young, because it's over 4 decades now I've been following the club,
So do you remember the 77 Cup final?
Vaguely.
Because that season, I remember it quite well because I'm a bit older than you, and I remember it. Liverpool, they'd almost, they'd won the league title.
Yeah.
And they went to Wembley, and 3 days later they were going to Rome. I think it was in Rome. And they were going to play Borussia Mönchengladbach in the European Cup final. And it was the first time they'd won the European Cup. And I remember, they were on for the treble.
That's right.
And I think they took the lead against United, if I'm not mistaken. And then United came back and won 2-1. And then after the game, they got interviewed on the coach. And they were obviously really devastated. And I remember one of them, I can't remember who it was that said it. I think it might have been Souness, or one of them certainly said, oh, just watch, we're going to go and absolutely swamp the place now in that European Cup final. And they did.
Yeah.
Like they absolutely destroyed that Mönchengladbach team, but then they were a good side as well, you know.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Yeah, again, my sort of memories of it would be kind of Clements and stuff like that. You know, I was a big fan of Ray Clements and Phil Neal, of course. I loved Phil Neal. I've a story. The first time I went over to Anfield with my son, the first time we went over together was for the final in Kiev. We went over to watch the screening of the final at Anfield, because obviously we couldn't go to Kiev. And it was his first time over there, and I got him tickets for the Cop. So we were sitting in the Cop watching these big screens of the final. And I booked the tour and all for him, and I booked the museum and the trophy room and all that kind of stuff, the boot room, the whole tour and all. And we booked a lunch. There's a hospitality restaurant there, and we booked lunch there. And in the restaurant that they have, you kind of sit into these booths. And the booths have screens on the wall beside you where they're replaying all the great European Cup finals, because we were going to play Real Madrid. And the one that popped up while we were having our lunch was the one where Phil Neal scored the penalty. He scored the winner. Yeah. And we were having lunch there, and I said to Ben, what do you think of that? And he goes, oh, that's just amazing, you know what I mean? Because the one thing I always say to people is, if you're getting your kid into football, let him decide whatever team he wants to follow. It doesn't matter. But if he decides to follow your team, make sure he understands the history and the love and all that sort of stuff about the club, and go deep into that so you understand how important it is. And I often say to people, the first thing I do when I hit Liverpool is I head up to the ground, and I always pick up a scarf, and I always lay a scarf at the Hillsborough Memorial. And I always say a few prayers and a blessing and all that kind of stuff. And it gets quite emotional and stuff like that, you know. And I always put them through that. And they have a champions wall over there, actually. And it's a mural of all the great captains and the trophies and all that kind of stuff. But it's all made up of little tiles, which is pictures that you can send in and buy a tile on the wall. It's there forever. And we got a picture of the two of us in the Cop when we were doing the tour. And that picture is on the wall at the Superstore in this big mural and stuff like that. And I got it for him for Christmas a couple of years ago. And he got a plaque for his wall that shows it as well. And when we went over, I showed it to him. And he says to me, what made you think of getting that? And I said, because one day I won't be coming over here with you, and you'll be coming over with your kids, and you'll be able to show them your granddad. And I just thought it was kind of cool, you know.
No, it is cool. That's really nice, because
it's really
that
cool.
thing's going to be there forever now.
Absolutely, yeah. And going back to the story, we were in the restaurant anyway. Phil Neal scores the penalty, and who's over the far side of the restaurant having lunch? Phil Neal. So I said to Ben, "Come on over," and he was Phil Neal was eating a bit of lunch, and he was sitting beside. They had a European Cup out, so you could get pictures with it and all. And I walked Ben over to get a picture with the cup. And I said to Ben, I winked at Phil Neal and I shook his hand. And Ben was getting a picture with the cup. And Ben said to me, who's that man? And Phil Neal heard him. And I said, that's the man that while you were having your lunch, put the ball in the back of the net in the penalty. And Phil Neal got up, he was laughing, and we were laughing. And Ben sat down, Ben was talking with him and all. And I said, look, I hope I'm not disturbing your lunch or anything and stuff like that. You're an absolute legend to me and all this kind of stuff. He's a great guy, Phil Neal. But he's very, at the time, he was still competitive and all. When I was talking to him about the final against Real Madrid that we were going to go and watch and stuff and all, he says he was so pumped up for it, like as if he was going out and playing. And I said to him, what do you think of the match? And he said, I'd love to still be able to put my boots on and go out and show Real Madrid a thing or two. And it was great to hear it, you know what I mean? And here he was having his lunch and all, and Ben was blown away by it and all. He couldn't believe it. I said, that's the man who just scored the penalty, who you've just been revering over there while having your lunch. And he couldn't believe it. He didn't believe me. He didn't believe me, and it was gas. It was just great. And then we went over there, I think one of the matches last season, we booked the hospitality in the Sandon. And we were sitting down having it was a 3-course meal and a Liverpool legend, the usual hospitality stuff. And who walks in to do the hospitality? Only Phil Neal. And Phil Neal's walking around all the tables, giving it all the usual stick, you know. Phil Neal, how's your lunch and all, looking forward to the game. You know, the usual stuff that they do.
Yeah.
And then he comes over and he's standing at our table. And I said, here, pal. I said, sit down there. There's a chair for you. And he sat down at the chair. And he had a couple of drinks at the table with us and all. And I was chatting about the day we spoke in the restaurant and all and this kind of thing. He was just laughing and all. And Ben was laughing. And then when he went off, Ben said, you don't give a shit, do you? He says, you do anything, wouldn't you? And I said, I don't care. I said, these are my legends. He says, why would I care and stuff like that? And it was gas and it was so funny. But yeah, just those little stories. I love that kind of thing, you know.
No, and the thing is, they love it. They love it when people interact with them like that. That's the thing, mate. Do you know what I mean? They really do.
Yeah.
And because I remember once years ago, I was visiting this lad who was terminally ill, right? He was a massive Arsenal fan. He was bedridden and stuff. And one day I was there chatting to him and Charlie Nicholas walked in, right? And I was chatting away to Charlie as well. And he was loving it. He was like giving me stick and like winding me up about my accent. And it was hilarious. It was just like, you know, a normal fella down the pub, you know?
Yeah. Yeah, we were walking. We were over on another trip as well, and we're kind of lucky that way. We were walking through Liverpool One, you know, the shopping centre, and Sammy Lee was walking through. It was the morning of a game, and we were walking through, and Sammy Lee was walking through, and I said to Ben, and my mate Dino was with me as well, but I said to Ben, I said, "There's Sammy Lee," and Ben goes, "Who's Sammy Lee?" You know, and I said that, and Sammy Lee was coming towards us. He could hear us. I said, who's Sammy Lee, Ben? And here he was, perked up, Sammy Lee, waiting for the answer and all. I said, he's Sam Allardyce's number 2. And he just looked at me and I said, nah, I'm only messing, Sammy. I said, I know you're a legend. It's all good. We get a few pictures and all, you know. But it was good cracking on. But I was winding Sammy up and asked, what are you thinking all that time? Sam Allardyce's number 2 and all. We were giving him socks and all, but it was great crack. But he took it in good jest. And I said to Sammy before he led, I said, I'm going to get him when he gets back to the hotel now to Google you and do his homework on you now so he makes sure he knows next time he meets you.
Exactly.
Yeah, such fun, though. Such fun.
So when you started watching it now, when you started watching football on a regular basis, how would you do it? Did you go to like a local Liverpool supporters club in Dublin, or did you watch it on the TV at home, or did you go to the pub? How did it work?
Yeah, no, it would be at home mainly. I would have watched it, and you remember we've spoke about it loads of times. Like FA Cup final day was a whole day, and all this kind of thing. It was huge and all, you know. And any of the cups or the end of season, the league and stuff like that was always huge as well. But back then, I mean, you didn't hear a whole lot. There wasn't a whole lot of information out there. You wouldn't have heard about players going or players signing and all this kind of thing. You don't get what you get now. Now you know what they're eating for their breakfast, dinner, lunch, the whole lot, what they drive, how much air they put in their tires. You know everything now. But it was different back then. You didn't get a lot of information, you know, and you weren't fully aware of players that were about to leave or coming to the end, or players that were coming in and all that kind of stuff. And yeah, but mainly I would have watched it at home. And of course, you didn't you know, it was quite selective in what you could find as well. So like having Liverpool on the box to watch, I know they got a lot of airtime back then, but it was still a real treat. Not like now where, you know, you can pick whatever you want to watch at this stage. So it was pretty cool, you know. And I always remember like the, you know, Dickie Davis and all that kind of stuff, because obviously we've spoke World of Sport fans as well with the pro wrestling and all that kind of stuff. So, you know, my weekend was always set out. It was always kind of pro wrestling. Then it was the football. And then, you know, I always remember the fear that went through me of having to do my homework on a Sunday evening. And, you know, Sunday evening will be bullseye and all that kind of stuff. And it's funny enough, I still sit in the bed here at times and I'll throw on an episode of Bullseye just to watch it. I was watching it the other night. So things never change. And you'd watch, what else would be on? Minder, the Sweeney, the Professionals, and then all that stuff you'd be watching. And then what was the one I didn't watch? Spitting Image would be on. Remember Spitting Image, of course, which was absolutely hilarious. And then I never got into, what was the other one? Tales from the Unexpected. Is that what it was called? Remember Tales from the Unexpected?
Someone said on the radio the other day that they were doing a pilot show of that. They were trying to bring it back.
Reboot it and bring it back. Yeah, I never actually watched it. I couldn't even tell you what Tales from the Unexpected was about and stuff like that. I never got to watch it. But yeah, that was it. Like that was kind of the weekend.
Yeah, I remember rightly. Tales of the Unexpected. It was just like weird stories, like you know, strange murders or
yeah.
you know.
Do you know what?
ghosts.
Do you know what? Do you know what didn't have me watching it? It was kind of weird back then because kind of the whole sex thing and stuff like that was kind of different back then. You know, it was kind of there was a bit of mystique to it, and it was kind of the secret sort of section stuff thing. You know, but I always remember, you know, if something kind of fruity came on the telly, like my parents, of course, were huge fans of Dallas and Dynasty and the Colbys and all that kind of stuff. So there was always that kind of sex undertone and all these kind of things. Larry Hagman and JR and all. He was always trying to bed everyone and stuff. But that was always a little bit uncomfortable when you're watching it with your parents back then. So I always remember Tales from the Unexpected. I was kind of binned off the bed then because I know the intro used to be the naked women dancing across the screen. Remember the silhouettes? So yeah, it was always kind of a little bit embarrassing, you know. So I never got to watch it. Never thought. And see, back then, remembered as well, you didn't have a telly in every room. There was one telly in the house, and the dad basically dictated what you watched once he came home and stuff like that, or the mum. And there was no remote control as well. So as kids, we were the TV remote control. You know, the dad be sitting back in the chair. And I always remember as a kid as well. I don't know if you got this as well, but as a kid, the distance from the couch to the telly always seemed enormous because the dad tell you, get up and put on channel 2, get up and put on channel 4, and you'd have to push in buttons that you'd have to do and stuff like that.
Right.
So they'd always, because the dad never get out of the chair. Once the dad had come home from work and he'd been working all day, he'd have his bit of dinner, plonk himself in the chair, and that'd be it. And he'd just keep on telling you throughout the whole night, put on channel 4, put on channel 6, whatever it is. And I always remember putting in that mileage going back and forward to the telly. And I always, when I think back in my memory and my history, my vague memories of that would be that we had the longest sitting room in the world. Now, it probably wasn't at all, but maybe it was just the amount of times I had to get up and down out of the chair to change the channel for him. And that was it, you know. So, and that was it. And I remember we had a disaster one time. My dad liked playing darts as well. And the dartboard where we had the telly, the dartboard used to be on the wall across from it, so you'd be thrown across the telly if you like. I remember one day one of the darts hopped out of the telly and burst the tube. The nib went into the tube and split the telly. And I remember there was war, you know, because it wouldn't be like now where, you know, you just go out and get another telly or whatever it is. Back then, tellies were a big thing. They were the star prize on Bullseye and all, you know what I mean? So it was a big deal. So I remember we had to wait, we had to save up to get a telly and all that kind of stuff, because it was tough times in Ireland back then, you know. Like, if you had food on the table and clean clothes, you were winning back then, you know.
Yeah, because I can remember as well back in the day that it would take about 5-10 minutes for the TV to get warmed up before it'd start working.
That's right. Yeah. And you would think the tube would burst. You would think the tube. You think the tube would popped. Yeah.
And then if Dallas came on or something like that, woe betide you if you made a noise.
Yeah.
Or
Silence.
you started talking. Like,
Silence.
it had to be deathly silent so that they didn't miss anything, because there was no way of recording what was on the TV. There was no Sky Plus. There was no video recorders. Nothing. It was one chance to watch it, and that was it.
I remember.
Off the hook.
Remember at Christmas time and all, you'd get the TV guide. What was it, the Radio Times or whatever it was over there?
Yeah,
we used to get the RT guide, and you'd be marking out with a pen then when the movies were on and putting in your schedule for Christmas so it didn't interfere with anyone else's TV and all this kind of thing and all. And sometimes if you were really posh, you had a VHS player now, and you used to record the VHS, and you'd break the tab on it and put the sellotape across it so you could keep on recording. And it was great times, but like it scheduled your whole. Now you don't really. Now we really don't have schedules anymore. So we don't have any kind of. There's no time frame, man. If you miss something today, you can get it later. Everything is kind of on demand, and it's just kind of handed to you. Back then, you kind of had to work for it a little bit, you know. Even if you went out playing with your friends, you'd be saying, "Got to get back for about 5 to 8. Dallas is on at 8 o'clock," and all this kind of thing. Or the mother told me to be back at 6 for the dinner. If I'm not back at 6, I wouldn't be getting the dinner, and all this kind of thing. And you know, the dinner be gone into the dog or whatever it is and stuff like that. Yeah. Great times, yeah.
Because the thing is, as well, guys, you need to remember but these times that Niall and I are talking about, there wasn't live football on TV either.
Very seldom.
It was like recorded highlights, and it'd be like Match of the Day, something on Sunday, which was similar to Match of the Day called Big Match. and that was about it. And then there was used to be a show in midweek called Midweek Sports Special, if clubs were playing abroad in Europe and stuff, where you'd see highlights if you were lucky of certain games and whatnot.
Yeah.
But that was it, really. So, Noel, did you ever get to go over to Anfield when you were a young fella?
No. Even though it was probably cheap enough, financially we just couldn't do it. And that was just the way it was and stuff like that, but I've caught up over time and stuff like that and all, but yeah, financially we wouldn't have been able to do it, we didn't holiday a lot either as well. My mum was quite claustrophobic, so she'd never get on a plane, funny enough, and when she met my dad was working for Aer Lingus, so it makes sense of that. So it was kind of a mad one, so my mum never really flew anywhere, so she never experienced. I think she went to the Isle of Man for her honeymoon, and there's pictures of my dad and my mum in the Isle of Man in a small little bar. I think they're having 2 pints of Guinness or something like that on their honeymoon, and I think that's the only one time she flew, and she said she'd never get into a plane again, and she didn't. So we used to holiday a lot, probably in Ireland, and it wasn't really holidays either. My dad used to own a bar at one stage down in Wexford, down near the volcano, down in Cortown, down near Coyle, and it was kind of like a bar plus a kind of a guest house on top with bedrooms, stuff like that, like a B&B and stuff like that. So we used to holiday down there a lot in the summer and stuff like that, because the one thing about holidaying in Ireland is it's lovely when you get the weather. But if you don't get the weather, there's only so many games of cards and Monopoly you can play in a caravan park or whatever it is. You know what I mean? It's tough. It's tough going. But yeah, that's mainly what we used to do and stuff like that. So yeah, we didn't holiday a hell of a lot,
Fair play to you, mate. So where are we? So during the time you've been following Liverpool now, have you ever met any? Or you talked about how you met Phil Neal. Did you meet or bump into any other famous footballers?
Oh yeah, like I've met most of them at this. Like I met Stevie and I met Robbie Fowler, Redknapp, Razor. Who else have I met? Ian Callahan. Met a good few of them. Bruce Godler. Met a lot of them over time and stuff like that. So yeah, it's been a pleasure to meet them and stuff like that and all, and it's great. And the one thing I'd say about the lads is most of them that I've met a lot of them on it. They used to, Liverpool back in the day, especially in the 90s, used to do a lot of pre-seasons over in Ireland and stuff like that. So they used to go and play Shelbourne and teams like that at the time. So you get to meet them all, and it wasn't the distance that you get now. So it'll be quite up close and personal. So if you know the Irish grounds that are over here, like the first row of the seats is nearly at the back of the dugout, basically, so there's no hiding and stuff like that. And I remember meeting Razor and stuff like that, and John Scales and a few lads like that and stuff like that. Was always good fun. And then I remember I used to go to a nightclub, actually. Funny enough, this was on the back of the 94 World Cup in the US. We signed Bob and we signed McAteer on the back of that because they had a breakout tournament, if you like, And I remember that summer after the World Cup, the boys were back in town, and what they used to do is they used to do little appearances around nightclubs, if you remember back in the day, to earn a few quid or get a free night out on the champagne and stuff like that and all. And I remember I was leaving a nightclub one night in Dublin, and who was on the door? McAteer and Bob were on the door handing out concessions. Next time you come, you get £1 off or £2 off your entry or whatever. Remember the old tickets they used to do for the nightclub?
Yeah.
And I remember I turned around to the two boys and I said, Jesus, lads, is the pay at Liverpool that bad? And the two of them just looked at me, and it was just comical, And then I got a picture. I don't know where it is, but I got a picture with the two boys, and I was holding up the concession card, and it was gas. But the boys would always be like, once the weekend was done, the boys were back in Dublin and they were partying large, Good crack. Robbie used to be always well with them and stuff like that. But they'd always go to a couple of the clubs I frequented, and I'd always wonder. They must have thought I was a United fan because I used to rip into them every time I seen them. You know what I mean? Even though I was a Liverpool fan, I probably had jerseys at home with McAteer and Bob and all on it and stuff like that. No, but I used to. Jesus, lads, is it that tough at Liverpool that you're over here handing out concessions at the night?
I could say it must have been great fun, winding them up and
Oh yeah, absolutely.
having a good laugh with them and stuff.
Yeah, I remember I went on a night out actually. Robbie Fowler was doing an evening with McIntyre, and the two of them were doing it down in a pub called The Forge down in Wicklow here. And I brought Ben down to meet them and stuff like that. And I have the jersey that's behind me there in the middle one, just over my earphones. That's from the Worthington Cup that we won. And I was going meeting Robbie Fowler, the one that we won. I think it was in Cardiff. I think it was where we was it one of them anyway. Not Cardiff. Would have been in Cardiff. Yeah, absolutely. And I remember we were going down to meet Robbie, and McIntyre was there as well. And McIntyre is great. I don't know if you've ever seen Jason McIntyre live, but he's absolutely hilarious. He is on point and on it all the time. Doesn't give you an inch and stuff like that. Robbie's a little bit more drier, but it takes a bit of time for Robbie to come out. But once he comes out, then he's pretty cool and stuff like that. But I remember I was getting the jersey signed by Robbie, and it was a cool moment. Ben was there, and I said to Robbie, I said, when he was signing the jersey, I said, Robbie, do you remember that goal? And he goes, lad, I remember every goal I scored for Liverpool. And I just thought that was so super cool. What a great answer, you know what I mean? It was just class. And I kind of, when I said it, I kind of knew it was coming, you know, that kind of way. And he says, I remember every goal I scored for Liverpool, he said. So it was kind of cool, you know. And I was explaining to Ben, I said, Ben, what a player Robbie Fowler was. Good Lord, he scored every type of goal. He was brilliant.
He was a phenomenal striker.
Yeah,
absolutely. I think he was one of the best finishers this country's ever produced. Like he got the ball to him in the penalty area. 9 times out of 10, it was in the back of the net.
Yeah. I remember one he scored. Didn't he score an absolute pile driver one time against Villa? I think he had the blonde hair at the time. He was playing against Aston Villa, and he cut in from the left onto the right, and he left fly with one. And it just ended up in the top corner. And I just remember the celebration. I think he was wearing the green and white jersey, actually, and he had the hair dyed blonde. Remember they all went through this phase with the rave, saying that they were all dyeing their hair blonde and all that kind of stuff. It was crazy. And yeah, I remember. I think somewhere actually up in the attic in a bag I have. Remember the Dockers t-shirt that they did at the time? Remember when he was supporting the Dockers? And they did the Dockers t-shirt that was like the Calvin Klein logo, and it was the Dockers. Yeah, I had that t-shirt somewhere in the attic and all. I ended up buying the t-shirt and everything and all. It was class. Loved it. Fowler. Yeah.
So listen, guys, please make sure you go and subscribe to the Upper Tier. He's got a great channel, especially if you're a Liverpool fan as well. He does something called the Shankly Sessions, and he does videos as well outside of this periodically, a lot of the time about Liverpool as well. And they're great, absolutely fantastic. This man's knowledge about football and Liverpool is just on point, and it's unbelievable. It's an absolutely lovely fella as well. So please go and make sure you subscribe to him and put likes on all his videos, all that sort of stuff. And I'm telling you, I guarantee you, especially if you're a Liverpool fan, you will not be disappointed. But he does lots of stuff about general football as well. So honestly, I think you'll absolutely love it. So, no, when you were a young fella, did you ever play with football toys or games, video games, things like that? Because I remember when I was a kid, there was this game. It was like with dice and charts called Legacta, and you'd like throw the dice and it'd give you the score of a match, and then you'd fill out a league table and points and all this carry on. Did you have anything? Did you do anything like that?
No, I didn't. I had the lads who I told you I played football with on the road. They had Subbuteo. They were the first ones to get Subbuteo, and I always thought that was really, really cool and stuff like that. And then eventually they expanded that. You were able to get your team. Remember, originally it was just red and blue, I think, and then you were able to eventually get your own team and stuff like that. No, I didn't have much like that. I remember there was I think my early days of stuff like Atari and stuff like that, because I wasn't a big gamer. I think there was a game out from the Atari called Penalty Shootout or something like that, and it was basically just it was kind of like, remember the old bip like the blocks and the tennis that they used to have on it. It was like that, but it was like you could score a goal, you could score a penalty in a goal and stuff like that. But basic as hell, line drawings, you know, it didn't even look like football basically, but they called it penalty shootout. And I remember the box on it looking really, really cool and stuff like that. Now I was big into the charts. Remember they used to give away the charts for the World Cups and stuff like that and all.
Yeah.
I remember having the charts for them. You get them in the local newspaper or whatever it is, and you'd be filling in the chart every day with the results and all. They were really, really cool. And I always remember collecting the stickers and the cards and that kind of stuff. They were always really, really cool. And there was always 4 or 5 players that you couldn't get. So that's what drew you in. You had to keep on buying the packets. And you'd end up with remember what we used to call the swap piles, and you used to have the swap piles, and there'd be millions in it. You'd be going around being an elastic band. And no one would want any of the cards you had because everyone had them because they just come out of every pack. It was the biggest scam in the world and stuff like that. But there was always about 4 or 5 you couldn't get. And I don't think I ever completed the set, funny enough.
I don't know anyone who ever completed the set,
yeah.
mate.
Yeah, there was always
it was con.
Yeah, there was always 4 or 5 players I don't think they ever even produced. So you were never going to complete. So it just kept you going back to buying them and stuff like that. But I remember, was it 82? The 82 World Cup? Was it? Was the 82 World Cup in Mexico?
That was Spain.
Spain, was it? Yeah, I remember I was staying for that tournament. I was staying in Birmingham. My dad used to race greyhounds, and he used to go over and race greyhounds in Wolverhampton. And he had a friend over there who used to train dogs with him, kind of like a partnership type thing. And he used to head over with a couple of dogs there over to Wolverhampton to race greyhounds. And we used to stay on this farm in Birmingham. And I remember that was the time that the World Cup and all was going on and stuff like that. So I remember following that, and I had the chart up on the wall. We were over there for about 10 or 12 days while he was racing dogs. And I used to look forward to the football and updating the chart and all that kind of stuff. That was my one and only trip away with my dad on a plane. And I remember my first time on a plane was just the scariest thing ever. Like, it was just, and at the time as a kid, I always suffered from motion sickness as well. So, you know, you could drive 20 minutes down the road and my head would be out the window nearly thrown up and stuff like that, you know, and used to do my dad's head in. And I remember I got on the plane and he took out 2 of those, you know, the sick bags. And they're not like the way they are now on the planes where they're real neat and tidy and all. You used to take the sick bag out on the plane. It was like an airbag out of a car, you know, back then, you know, and it was kind of crazy and stuff. And I remember he was taking them out beforehand and all. He goes, I know you're going to get sick and all, but I was grand. And I remember that trip we went over there, he won 3 trophies. He won the Wolverhampton Chase and stuff like that. Trophies are still somewhere down in the Sisters, I think. And I remember we were coming back on the plane, coming home, and we had all the trophies. They were in the middle seat between us. And everyone was asking us what the trophies were and all. And I was real proud as punch. I felt like one of these footballers coming home with the trophy on the coach and stuff like that. And I said, and I was there. I had no clue what we had won. I was too young and all, you know. But I remember anytime anyone asked, said, oh yeah, we won this cup for this, and we won this cup for that. I was real chatty and all. I hadn't got a clue. I was absolutely bullshitting it, you know what I mean? But it was just super cool to have trophies around me and stuff like that. And all. It was so cool.
No,
felt like one of the footballers and stuff.
It must have been really exciting because
yeah.
I love greyhound racing. I really do. I think it's brilliant, you know, because it's just so quick, you know.
Yeah.
The dog track nearest to me is Wimbledon.
Okay.
Yeah, and at Wimbledon they've got this like window, like in the area that's for the public. Like you sit down, you have your fish and chips, or your beer, and like the screens are up as well, so you can watch the races. And then they got a little window into the area where the dogs are, so you can watch them. One of my mates, his wife would like sit there intently watching the dogs, and he'd say, "What are you doing? Staring at the dogs?" She's saying, "I want to see which one's going to go to the toilet before it races." I said, "Why?" She says, "Because I'm going to bet on that one because he's going to be lighter than the other."
Yeah, absolutely, yeah. And you always looked out, and if one of them was having a crap, that's the one you never betted on because obviously he's being fed and he was cramped up and stuff like that. Man, yeah. So they're more old wives' tales and stuff like that. I remember when we used to go in Dublin to the dog tracks, they used to be just concrete steps. It wasn't the glamorous that it is now. You'd be lucky even if you got chips at it. And I remember my dad did a forecast one night on the tout. He used to have a few bets and stuff like that, especially after you'd given up the drink and stuff like that. So what was he going to do with a few quid and have a few bets and get a bit of excitement in his life? But I remember he gave me a docket one night, and it was a trio or a forecast or something like that normally they paid decent money, and he didn't expect it to pay good money, and he handed me the ticket and he says, you go down and collect that, he says, and come back up to me, he says, and if there's anything on it, he says, you can keep a tenner for yourself. Now a tenner back then was a good weekend for a kid, you know what I mean? It was like I have a tenner, like, you know. And I remember I saying him, here I was queuing up the pay window to get paid off the tote docket, you know. And I see him running down to me now. Now, he was running down to me like, I don't know, he was like Linford Christie in the 100 metres or something like that. And I was there going, what's wrong? What's wrong? I thought there was an issue. And he grabbed the docket off me. He says, that's worth 750 quid. And 750 quid back then was huge money, you know. So I remember he says, I'll queue up for that. And I said, all right, no problem. So he queued up and he got the money. And in fairness to him, he handed me 20 quid over, believe it or not. So it was huge. 20 quid to me then was huge, you know. But yeah, some crazy stories and stuff like that. Crazy stories.
It's brilliant.
Yeah.
So when you we spoke earlier now about how you would play football out in the street with your mates and whatnot, and I remember doing that as well. But did you ever have like a team? Did you and your mates ever make a team, or did you get involved in like a work-based team, or did you play football for the school or anything like that?
Yeah, I played football. I played football for the primary school and the secondary school, but never. I played for Mount Merrion as well, which would have been our local club up the road from us and stuff like that for a while. But we used to actually put teams together in the summer, and we used to organise tournaments where we play against different housing estates. And that was always fairly interesting because that always got a bit feisty. And of course, you know, when you're pulling teams together back then, there was no such thing as your under 16s and your under 14s and all. Like you could be 8 years of age and you could be getting marked by a 16-year-old or a 17-year-old. You'd be getting upended and thrown all over the place and all, you know. So they were always fun games. Most of them normally ended up in rows and all sorts of stuff and all, because lads would be getting kicked to bits and lads would be going mad and stuff like that. And there was always friends from different estates, so the banter would be rife and stuff like that. That was always good fun. Playing in primary school was always a lot of fun as well. But it was tough back then. Like we'd primary school and secondary school was quite tough. Like it wasn't like it is today, you know what I mean? Like I went to a De La Salle Brothers school for secondary school and stuff like that, and they were hard people, you know what I mean? If you stepped out of line, you got put back into line in a fairly serious way and stuff like that, you know. And I remember I had a year master in secondary school called Maurice McMahon, and he was a man from Kerry. He was a big GAA man from Kerry as well. And he had a busted nose. His nose down the front was flat and twisted. So obviously he got into a few scraps during his day and stuff like that. But he used to run down the corridor, and he used to wear the black capes, and he was like Batman running down the corridor. The cape would be spread out fully. And if there was anyone outside the class, I don't know what it was about teachers back then, but when they hit you with a hand, it was like you got hit with a spade. That's what it felt like, because you were kind of small at the time and their hands were so big. And I remember having them, like the teachers they were relentless, like, you know what I mean, keeping you in line. Like they dished it out big time, you know. I remember I had an Irish teacher. I won't mention his name, of course, but I had an Irish teacher, and he had that, you know, that disease on the hand, you know, that discoloring where you get the white and the brown blotches. I think Michael Jackson had it at one stage and stuff like that. And I remember his hands were kind of all blotchy and stuff like that, but his hands were huge. I remember his hands just being like sort of shovels. And when he hit you, your head spun. You know, it was nearly like a concussion. But they were tough taskmasters and stuff like that, you know. But look, back then the schools were packed, the classes were packed. There was 30, 40 people in a class trying to control 30, 40 lads. You know, not easy at all. And, you know, these lads gave as good as they got really at times, you know, and a lot of them deserved it and stuff and times and all that kind of thing. But yeah, it was primary school and secondary school was very, very tough at that time. plenty of stories about it and stuff like that. You know, you'd
Yeah, no,
remember the old meter sticks and all, of course. Remember the old plastic meter sticks? They were plastic, but they were the hardened ones. They were like skirting boards. And when you got a smack of one of them now, you knew all about it and stuff like that. And I remember even in primary school, they had the metal rulers. Remember when metal rulers became a thing? I remember you used to get hit with the metal ruler, and then you'd be sitting in the old style desk with the metal bars, and you'd go down and you'd put your hand on the metal bar to let your hand cool down after getting the belt of the ruler and stuff like that. And it was crazy. I remember in third class, I had a teacher, and I wrote an essay. We had to write it. It wasn't an essay. It was a story back then, maybe 2 pages or whatever. And I was mad. I was always fascinated with sharks. Ever since Jaws. Jaws is one of my favorite movies. I've always been fascinated with sharks. And I wrote a story about a seaside resort somewhere where there was shark attacks and stuff like that. And it was really, really cool and all. And I was dying to let the teacher see it and stuff like that. And he says, anyone who gets out of their desk without being called, they're getting a smack of the ruler. That's the way it was, you know. And this lad laid it in when he was giving you a smack of the ruler. Now it was like when Tiger Woods drives a ball. That's the kind of the run up to it that he would give it, you know. And I remember the guy beside me got called to hand up his essay, and I remember he sat back down with his essay, and I sat up and I went up with my essay, and he said to me, "What are you doing?" I hadn't been called, and I went, "Oh no." So I gave him the essay out with the hand, lettered me twice in the hand with the steel ruler, and I had to run back down to the desk and put my hand on the desk, the cold bar, to cool it down. And then he called me back up after reading the essay, and he says, "Great story that you did there." He says, "It's a shame you brought it up too early." You know what I mean? They were hardy feckers. You know what I mean? It was tough. You know.
They were ruthless, mate. Absolutely ruthless.
Yeah.
I remember I used to have a maths teacher who was an Irish nun. She was brutal, mate.
Yeah.
Absolutely brutal. She never gave me an inch. In fact, I think for some reason, she took a disliking to me. I don't know why.
Yeah.
She just took an immediate disliking to me.
Yeah.
And she never stayed at the school very long. I think she was there for about 6 months. And she disappeared and never came back again. I don't know what happened.
We did
incident with her, to be honest, and the way she could treat the kids, because it was really bad.
Yeah, we used to, when we were in 6th class, we were in the old prefabs. Because they were redeveloping the school, so they had us in these prefabs. And when you walked into the old prefabs, like when you'd shut the door, the whole prefab would shake nearly. You know what I mean? It's a wonder they stayed standing. And we used to have the blackboards, remember, on the easels. Remember, the blackboards would be on the stand, so you'd have the one on the wall, and then you'd have the one on the stand for when you're doing the different subjects. And they used to be held in with 2 wooden pegs. So when the teacher, we used to drive this teacher mad. So when he'd go out of the prefab to get supplies or whatever he was doing, we used to get the blackboard on the easel and put the blackboard right to the edge of the pegs. So when he'd shut the door on the prefab would shake and the blackboard would come down off the stand and smash the bits and stuff like that. And we broke his heart doing that. But he used to kill us. I remember he chased a friend of mine around the class one day, and we used to have, do you remember the old storage heaters with the bricks in them? Yeah. And these things nearly used to glow, like the Ready Brek kids. Remember these storage heaters used to nearly glow? They were hundreds of degrees. I'd say you could have melted metal in them. They were that warm. He chased him around the class one day, and he caught him between a storage heater and a desk. And he pressed the desk against the kid, and his hands were against the storage heater. And his hands were melting against the storage heater. Crazy, crazy stuff. Crazy stuff. Like, it was mental.
Mental. Madness. Yeah. It really was.
Yeah.
So, who would you say was your favourite footballer growing up, Niall?
Yeah, well, like I said, Ray Clements would have been huge for me. But I always loved the Irish guys at Liverpool and stuff like that. I was a big fan of Clements, Hansen, Phil Neal. Obviously, I mentioned there. Who else would have been there? I loved Steve McMahon because he was a killer. Souness was a killer. I loved those guys. Stevie, obviously, loved Stevie G and Robbie and those guys and stuff like that. Kevin Keegan, Steve Highway, those type of guys. Like, I Emlyn Hughes. I loved that kind of that balance that Liverpool always had between skill and hardness, and how it always blended and stuff like that. You had players in there that were really, really skillful and kind of a little bit finesse, and then you had always those killers in the midfield, McMahon and Souness and guys like that, just real men's men and stuff like that and all, so, but I grew up, but like, I don't necessarily, I mean, Stevie is one that sticks out in mind because he was there so long and came through as a Liverpool boy and captained the club and stuff like that and all, so I'd always have a place for Stevie G and stuff like that and all, but in terms of all those other guys, Hansen and all, and Bruce Gobbler and those crazy guys and stuff like that. Goalkeepers were always a good one because they're always lunatics. So I always find them so intriguing. My own son is a goalkeeper as well. When he plays and stuff like that, and he's a little bit like that as well. He'd never play outfield. They asked him to play outfield one day, and he walked off and said he wouldn't play again unless they put him back in nets. Goalkeepers are very, and it's very hard to find because you think about when we played ball in the street, who wanted to play in goals? No one. No one wanted to play in goals. Everyone wanted to be a striker. I was just too big.
Exactly. So, talking about strikers, what did you think about Kenny Dalglish?
Kenny's the cream, isn't he? Really, Kenny. They don't call him King Kenny for nothing. You know what I mean? And it was it's bittersweet, really, with Kenny, isn't it? Because he was such a fabulous footballer, and he's such what would I say? He's such an unassuming kind of person, and yet he gut you like a fish on the pitch, that kind of way. He was just, he was a sensational player. Like, I mean, he just had a thing for it. And then when he moved into management and stuff like that, and then of course, Hillsborough and everything happened then and all, and how that weighed heavy on him, and then he had to get out of football for a while and stuff because it was weighing on him and stuff like that and all, became very tough. Stepping into Liverpool as a player manager and stuff like that, that's an impossible task at that level. And trying to keep everything on the straight and narrow, and then dealing with Hillsborough and the fallout from Hillsborough back then and how that weighed so heavy on him and stuff like that. And then, of course, your crowd came up and upset us one night on the last day as well, didn't they? And whipped the league office and stuff like that and all. I remember it well. And then we went and bought Michael Thomas, which I thought was very, very strange that you go out and you buy the guy that broke your heart.
I really rated Mickey Thomas. I really did, because the thing about him is that he could play at right back. When he came into the team at Arsenal, he was a right back. And he did really well there. And then George suddenly decided to play him in midfield. And he never really looked back. But I thought he was a really good player. But I saw something really funny on Instagram the other day with Kenny Dalglish, right? Because he's a very, really, really funny guy.
Yeah.
And he was saying that he was comparing like Glasgow and Liverpool, right, the cities, right?
Yeah.
And he said they're both very similar cities. He said the people are very funny, they're very warm people, blah blah blah. And he said also they've both got two football teams. One's better than the other. One always wins. The other one don't win nothing.
Yeah.
I thought it was really funny.
Yeah. Yeah, no, he's good. Kenny's quite witty as well, and even now when you see Kenny, he's quite with it and stuff like that. I remember there towards the end of last season when Klopp pulled his hamstring. Remember he was running and he pulled his hamstring. Later on, I think the next game that we were at home, and Klopp was walking towards Kenny Dalglish, and Kenny started limping, holding his hamstring, slagging Klopp. And I just thought it was hilarious and stuff like that. Like Kenny's quite witty, but I'd say he has quite a dry sense of humor. I always remember his even his post-match interviews and all. He was the king of answering a question with a question, wasn't he? You'd say to him. I always remember post-match he'd being interviewed, and they'd say to him, "So, how do you think it went, or what was your thoughts on today? And he'd say, well, what was your thoughts on today? He'd always answer the interviewer with a question and push it back and stuff like that. Or oh really, I didn't say it that way, when they come in with him something direct and stuff like that. He was the king of deflection as well. It was great, like, you know what I mean? He'd always,
I've got a documentary that I found on YouTube about Alan Hansen. I don't know if I sent it to you, but
you did,
yeah. And Hansen in that documentary is talking about how Hillsborough, the Hillsborough disaster and Heysel really weighed heavily on Kenny, and it really, really upset him. So I was just wondering, no, what was your memories of those incidents? Because for me, it was horrific.
Yeah. Heysel was such an interesting one as well, because it wasn't I suppose when things don't happen, kind of how they describe it, on your doorstep, it kind of doesn't seem real. It seems kind of surreal. Now, in the English game, when things happen and stuff like that, we always felt, even over here in Ireland, it was on our doorstep if you were following your team, But I remember sitting down, and I remember Hillsborough happening. And at first I couldn't understand what was evolving. Like everyone else, there was pandemonium, and there was bodies getting dragged over railings and all sorts of stuff going on. And I remember the game was going on and the game having to be stopped. And I remember wondering, what was all the fuss? Why was the game being stopped? And originally I thought it was probably had a row broken out. I had fans from both ends gotten in together. Was there hooligans? Was this what was kicking off and stuff like that? We didn't understand the magnitude of it at the time and what was going on. And, it's just... to this day, it does. It weighs heavy. I'm sure Kenny carries that so heavy still. And you can even see how it affected Benitez when Benitez came into the club. He still gets involved in all the stuff related to Hillsborough and stuff like that, and all. Even Rafa does, and you can see it there at the memorial services that they do and all, how much people tear up and stuff like that. And it really, really did. It weighed heavy. So many families were affected by it, and it's... I suppose as you get older, you think of it in a different way, in terms of, I suppose, when you become a parent and a father and stuff like that. And I think about what would happen if Ben last year went over to the Notts Forest game and stuff like that. And I was thinking, one of the things that goes through your mind, imagine him going off to a game and he doesn't come back, and how would you deal with that and the fallout of it as a parent and all that. And, you'd never forgive yourself. You'd feel responsible yourself and all that kind of stuff. And it weighs really, really heavy. And like I said, when I go over there, that's my first port of call, Often the lads will say to me as well, before the game, when they're singing "You'll Never Walk Alone" in the stadium when we're in there, one of the things I do before the game starts is I bless myself. And it's just, I just bless myself, and I look up to, 97 angels and stuff like that, that hopefully we'll have a good result, and they're looking down on us, especially in finals and stuff like that. And also, it does weigh heavy. But what it did was it created that kind of, that us versus them and all, because we know what came out afterwards, and the apportionment of blame and everything that happened. And it still rolls on to this day, how hurting it is for people and stuff like that. And it really became, and that's why Liverpool, I suppose, is so unique. And I know people throw shade at it and all, there's always the victim crap and all that nonsense and all, they'll never understand it. And even when you hear it in the last season, away fans chanting stuff about it and stuff like that and all. And what they tend not to forget is there's probably people sitting in that stadium that lost people or were affected by that day, that still very much sits with them to this day, very heavy. And the reason they go to games is because they feel obliged, because they love Liverpool Football Club, and that's how invested they are in it and stuff like that. And I don't think people realise you could be chanting something stupid like that and not realise, just being an idiot. And the person 5 seats down from you, 10 seats down from you, or in the next block of seats, could be sitting there, who could be the auntie or the uncle or the nephew or the niece or the brother or the sister or whatever it is, of someone who lost their life that day. You know what I mean? And it's that's why I just hope, and I mentioned it on a number of shows this year, that that whole hate chant and stuff like that has to come in. That just needs to stop. It's just wrong. You know what I mean? And I think what it did was it really is at times when we need the club to step up at times when it's really difficult and stuff like that, it finds a way to step up. And that's why when you see things like FSG trying to trademark various things, or FSG trying to join a Super League, that's where I talk about where they've lost the connection with Liverpool Football Club. Is so much more than a football club. It's the fabric of that city. It's the fabric of those people. It's the representation of what those people are. It's the working class people, the songs, the chants, the connection, the culture, the history of that club rings, or that city rings through that club. And of course, Everton as well, the blue side as well. But it rings very much true and stuff like that. And, it's very, very tough to put into words. And very, very hurtful. And to be honest, I've been on a number of football forums and stuff like that where I've been managing them and stuff like that. And I've thrown people off from that kind of nonsense talk. That's kind of where I draw the line. I won't have that. I'm all up for the banter as much as anyone when it comes to football, but when it comes to those things, there's certain things that you don't go there. You don't go to Hillsborough. You don't go to Heysel. You don't go to all these different tragedies. You don't go to the Munich air disaster. You always have to hide the respect for those things, and that's how they should be treated, So yeah, I remember it that day. I was sitting there, I was watching the game, and bodies getting pulled out left, right, and centre. There was people running onto the pitch. There was at one stage ambulances coming onto the pitch and all sorts of stuff. It was horrible to see, and little did we know what was unfolding and how people would be affected and how it would change the course and the history of football and stuff like that and all. Just we talk about these events sometimes that happen and stuff like that, and it's only 5 or 10 years down the road when you realise, good Lord, how stupid sometimes we are as a society who thinks we're so clever. It's crazy.
It was crazy. And I remember that day because I was at Highbury and it was happening and we weren't aware of what was going on. And there was announcements being made over the tunnel. And there's been an incident at the semi-final and everyone assumed it was fans fighting because it was quite common in those days for fans to get involved in confrontations. And then when you got home and watched it on Match of the Day and whatever, you saw fans, opposition fans trying to rescue each other from what was happening. The Forest fans were carrying people off on advertising hoarding, using them as stretchers to take them to the ambulances and stuff.
People trying to resuscitate people on the pitch and all. And I remember people carrying people off. I have that vision in my mind of people. Remember, they were carrying people off, and I remember the legs just flopping. There was the bodies were lifeless and all and stuff like that. And it's unbelievable. And as I said, when I go over there with Ben, that's the first place we go. And I said to him as well, I said, when you're bringing your sons and daughters over one day and stuff like that, make sure this is very, very important. Very, very important.
It is important because people don't understand what it is like to be in something like that. I've got a small understanding because I was in a major train accident and I was nearly killed. I was trapped for 4 hours under a load of people and seating and stuff like that. I had severe crush injuries, compound fracture of one leg, and I ended up with PTSD because of it. And it was horrible, Niall. And then for someone to think that is something to banter people about, I'm sorry, it's not. And that's why I always get so upset when I see stuff like that. I've had to do 2 videos about this subject.
I think we did too. We did too. Remember last season when this hate chant stuff and all was coming out? I think you did one and I did one. Remember? Yeah, it's just a part. Like I can't understand it. You know what I mean? At the end of the day, we're all football fans, and there's a bit of tribalism. You love your club, I love my club, and stuff like that. But I'd never wish harm on any other football fan or anything like that. I wouldn't wish them bad or harm. For those 90 minutes, we're in competitive nature and there's banter and the proper banter, not the dark side of banter that sometimes comes out in people and stuff like that. But I think if that's a place where you go to that place, I think kind of you need to look at yourself in the mirror and you need to think the kind of human being you are, which is way beyond being a football fan and stuff like that and all, I just think a little bit of consideration for people stuff that I was over for the Arsenal game that we we played against you guys. I think it was a Carabao Cup game or something. It ended up 5. Remember when the penalty shootout? Remember you were absolutely trashing us and we came back into it. And I remember we were in the stands and the Arsenal fans were right beside us in the corner in the away end. And of course, all the Arsenal lads, they always show up to Liverpool, to Anfield, and they're in the Peaky Blinders gear. They have the paddy caps on them and stuff like that. They look real cool, and I love it. I love all that. And we were bantering each other back and forward. It was great. And you were scoring, we were scoring. It was like a boxing match on the ropes. It was brilliant. And I remember every time you scored and you were slagging us about it being a library, where's the noise and all this kind of thing. And we were bantering back as soon as we'd score back. And then I remember us winning. And I remember the boys were walking out and they called us down and we came down and we were hugging each other and shaking hands and all. It was great crack. And I said to the lads, lads, I really loved that. It was great crack. Proper banter between two sets of fans and stuff like that. No,
I've always found there to be a good relationship between Arsenal and Liverpool fans. I've never ever seen a problem between them, and that makes me really happy. It's not like there's been problems between us and United in the past. But I think that was a lot has got to do with Ferguson and Wenger. I think that had something to do with it. But yeah, it's good when it's like that, and that's the way it should be. So, no, when you look at your team, look over the history and that, who do you think was your greatest ever player?
Oh, this is such a tough one for me, isn't it? Because you got to remember, I've experienced 4 decades. And I've seen 4 decades of football evolving every single decade. So, Kenny for me is, he is the man who sits in the throne. Of course, Kenny will always be there. But I think in terms of longevity and all that kind of stuff, it's hard to look by Stevie. Stevie has given us some sensational moments and stuff like that. And to be fair to him in terms of his loyalty, we probably should have won a lot more, to be honest, that we didn't. He certainly deserved the Premier League at some stage, and through no fault of his own loyalty was supreme. But through the fault of the club maybe not doing what they should have done or gone far enough, we talk about it all the time about whether you do enough to fix up or you only half do it and stuff like that. I think we kind of let Stevie down a little bit there in terms of doing what we should have done to get back to where we needed to get back to. But Stevie would certainly be in there. Kenny, so many great players and stuff like that, and I was always even simple little things. I was always a big fan of Hippie and Honcho. It was the 2 boys at the back always put their bodies on the line. Carragher, of course. There's so many. I could name so many players. If you're putting me on the spot, I pick 2. Kenny obviously goes in there, and obviously Stevie. It's so difficult.
For me, like in terms of defenders, I'd have to go with Alan Hansen.
Yeah,
right.
Alan, yeah, absolutely.
I remember years ago, I went to see Maidstone United when they were in the Football League. They played an FA Youth Cup match at Highbury, right? And there was hardly anyone in there, and they just opened up like the East Stand, and I was on the upper tier, and I was watching the game, and none other than Gary Breen was playing for Maidstone, right? And mate, he looked absolute quality. Like he looked so comfortable on the ball, and I just turned to my mate. I said, "This kid, he was really young at the time. I think he was about 17 or 18." I said, he's going to be another Alan Hansen. And he just laughed at me. He said, he's nowhere near Alan Hansen's class.
Yeah. I was...
Because the way he was playing, he was just like so comfortable on the ball. He never got flustered. Yeah. Just like Hansen. It's just like watching Hansen.
So laid back, but yet so effective.
Yeah,
so laid back, but so effective. Yeah. I said it the other night. Actually, I was on a show the other night, and we were doing a match reaction to the pre-season show, and a young kid came on, Ben Doak, who was a very, very good prospect for us. He's a lovely little footballer and stuff like that. But he loves dropping the shoulders and dribbling, and the ball sticks to his feet and stuff like that and all. And I turned around on the match reaction. I said, "Jeez," I said, "he gives me shades of John Barnes." I said he's just the way he dribbles with the ball and stuff like that. And the lads on the podcast, they all just lost their mind and stuff like that. And I said, I'm telling you, lads, go back and look at the way Barnes glides with the ball and the way he dribbled and stuff like that. And all. I said, this lad is very like that and all and stuff. And it was gas the way we make those things. You know, McAllister, who's playing for us now, the World Cup winner off Brighton that we signed, he played a ball through the other night for a goal, the other night for I think it was Jota, was it? I think it was either Jota or Gakpo, whichever it was. And the ball that he played through, I said, lads, look at that pass. I said, that's exactly what Stevie G would do and all, you know what I mean? And it's the way you go back to those things and stuff like that. And then sometimes we get it horribly wrong, don't we? And they end up ponying. We go, you know, but the thing about content creation and doing YouTube videos and all is it's there forever. You can't escape because they clip
No,
you.
no. Once you did something like that, it's there. So, going to the other extreme, who do you think was your worst ever player?
Jesus, where do we start? we did this a few weeks ago as well on a stream as well, and I was looking back at all the players that we had signed. Jesus, Paul Konchesky and Sean Dundee. just so many. So it was so many bad players we got it wrong and stuff like that. And that was kind of that's kind of why I was left waiting 30 years, because we ended up so far in the shadow of some of these teams like your own one and United and all, and then Chelsea, of course, and now City and stuff like that, that you just, for years, we just didn't do what we were supposed to do. We ended up being so far down the pecking order in terms of players that we could get, makeshift kind of squads and all that kind of stuff. And, you know, we'd some brilliant players in the club and stuff like that, but we never got the mix right in terms of building on it. Like, we'd bring in the likes of a Mascherano, and by the time we started putting in the other pieces of the jigsaw in place, Mascherano was gone. Or, you know, we'd be building the team, we'd have Xavi Alonso there, and then he was gone. And back earlier in the 90s, Steve McManaman was there, and then he was gone and stuff like that. I remember Stevie's corner, I think we were playing against Celtic, and I remember Stevie picking up a ball and he dribbled past 3 or 4 Celtic players and launched a rocket into the far corner. I remember watching it one night. It might have been in the UEFA Cup or an old cup, whatever cup it was in or something like that. And I remember him scoring that goal, and I was always amazed by his dribbling, Steve McManaman, with the shaggy hair and the way he moved, and he was so slight and all, but he was so clever on the ball and stuff like that and all. But yeah, I don't know. There was there's a litany of players there that we got it wrong. You know, we sold Torres.
The goalkeeper who never used to keep playing on the PlayStation. What was his name? He ended up playing for England now, so he couldn't have been that bad.
David James.
Yeah.
Calamity James. That's what they used to call him, Calamity James.
There's lots of games where he was awful.
Yeah.
But,
we went through a phase where we tried to play football where we realised we were going to concede. But we just tried to outscore teams. Everyone remembers the great 4-3s against Newcastle and stuff like that, and Kenny dangling over the hoarding like someone had just beheaded him in the stocks and all that kind of stuff and all. And that's the kind of ball we played. Some of the matches we played against United, the 3-2s and all those various things and all. And it was just an absolute madness that we could never figure out that the issue was we needed to get in real top goalkeepers. And then when we got in decent goalkeepers, we never put the other parts in place to really make it work. You know, like the way we brought in Alisson, but we also brought in Van Dijk because Van Dijk is so critical to Alisson and either or, you know. And we always just fell that little bit short, you know what I mean? It's just, we always, you know, like even look at the team in 2005 that won in Istanbul. You know what I mean? It's as bang average a team in most areas as you'll ever get. But we found a way to win in Istanbul where we should have probably never won. And then we had a much better team going into the thing 2 years ago, 2 years after against Milan, where we should have beaten them and we got beaten. So it kind of evened itself out. But we won the final that we shouldn't have won, and we lost the final that we should have won because we absolutely bossed them that night, but we just couldn't beat them. Whereas the other one, they absolutely destroyed us, and then we just shell-shocked them in the second half and stuff like that. But you look at some of those players there that have a Champions League winning medal and stuff like that. It's crazy, you know what I mean? When you look at it, it's madness.
No, 100%, mate. And the problem is, if you don't keep on it, like you then get to a point where the rebuilding becomes so huge that you can't do it all at once because there's too much that needs to be done.
We're in the middle of it now. We're in the middle of it
Yeah.
now.
Except, and this is what happened with Tottenham a few years ago when they sold the Welsh guy, the winger.
Gareth Bale.
Yeah. They tried to spend all that money they got for him on about 7 or 8 players all at once. And it's too many players to bring in all at once because it never works.
The problem that we have at the moment is we have to fix up quickly, because the problem is we have a number of players at the moment that are in their prime years, and if we don't fix up quickly, we're binning off their years in their prime. You know, you've got the Van Dijks of this world, and obviously Jordan has gone now, and Fabinho's gone and stuff like that. But you look at Mo Salah, you know, these guys are heading into their 30s if they're not there already. You can't be binning off their career years now at the moment just because owners aren't going to pony up to fix up what needs to be fixed up. We have to fix up very quickly now, hope that it all gels and hope that it hits the ground running. We can't be turning around.
You've just mentioned 3 players. So that's sort of like, add one more to that, and that's the maximum that you can bring in all at once before it starts becoming a problem.
Oh, we'll bring in more, because I think we've sent between players leaving and between loan deals, we've sent out 11. We've sent, but this is, you reap what you sow, because for the last 3 years we haven't signed any midfielders. So now we have never, where if you look at how much talent we've had at the back, you look at how much talent we've had on the front when all players are fit and stuff like that. It's the midfield where the problem was, and what they did was they wrung it dry. And that's what we did. This is the same thing we did in the 90s as well, where we played players till they were dead on their feet and we never replaced them properly. And that's what came back to bite us. And then the task was so monumental. United had gotten so far ahead of us. You guys had gotten so far ahead of us, you know, and then Chelsea, of course, came along with the Roman money and it changed the world. And then City came along and they changed the world again. So we've always been fighting against that, you know what I mean? Because we just haven't been that club that's never gone out and fully done what needed to be done. You know what I mean? There's players down through history that we never replaced. And I suppose the argument is, like, how do you replace a Kenny Dalglish? You know what I mean? How do you replace a Kevin Keegan? You know, how do you replace a Steven Gerrard? You know, how do you replace a Gini Wijnaldum and stuff like that? But the fact that you kind of ignore it and you don't do it, or even try to do it, like if you totally just disregard the middle of your pitch and your DM and all that kind of stuff, and you wring those guys dry. And I know the background to Jurgen Klopp and his training and stuff like that. It puts years on players, you know. They reckon, like, you know, 5 or 6 years playing under Jurgen Klopp is the equivalent of a career for some players, because it's mentally taxing in terms of the pressure, the training and everything else that comes with it. He's on it all the time. Even reports coming out in the last couple of days as well that at the moment on pre-season they're training 3 times a day. That's a lot. That's a lot, you know. He's a workhorse. He's a taskmaster. It's typical from Germany as well, you know what I mean? He's a sergeant. This is army. This is drill stuff, you know what I mean? That's what you expect and stuff like that. But it's tough. Even your man, the new guy Szoboszlai, who came in from RB Leipzig, he turned around and he was being interviewed the other day. He says, "I've never experienced training 3 times in one day anywhere I've been." You know what I mean? So obviously it was an eye opener for him, you know what I mean? And
bit of a culture shock.
Yeah, and I was wondering, because he hasn't smiled since he got to the club. He's the Hungarian captain, and he hasn't smiled since he got to the club, and he hasn't even smiled even the other day in pre-season in the match. I don't think he even smiled once. He's under, it's like torture to him at the moment, you know. You can imagine Klopp standing at the gates of the training area going, "Well, lads, welcome to Guantanamo Bay. Here we go." You know what I mean? And it's just they're putting them through the ringer. You know, so I'd say it's tough and stuff like that, you know. But it's that's it. And hopefully this season's, I wouldn't hold my breath, but hopefully this season, I think hopefully we'll bring in another 2 or 3 players. That's at least what we have to do. We were carrying a bit of dead weight that we got rid of, and a couple of those 11 are lads, youth that have gone out on loan and various things and all and stuff like that. So hopefully we can fix up, or we'll get found out pretty quickly, you know.
Yeah, I mean, I hope for your sake that you do manage to, because it needs to get addressed. You know.
Well, I think between ourselves, yourselves, Chelsea, United, Newcastle, Aston Villa are doing great things at the moment. I think there's an onus on us to make it a proper league again, if you like, in terms of a competitive league. I think what Man City is doing is, for us to let them off the hook so much, says as much about us as it does about them. And you hear people saying all about like the charges and the money and the sports washing and all that kind of stuff. At the end of the day, there are issues that'll have to be resolved one way or another, either guilty or not guilty, whatever it is. But the reality is, I think those 4 or 5 clubs that I mentioned there's an onus on them to sort of recreate what used to be in the Premier League before, or even before it was the Premier League and stuff like that. I think it doesn't help at all if one team is so successful on that kind of level, and they're the benchmark, whether we like it or not. You've seen it with your own club. You're spending a fortune to try and reduce that gap and try and get over the line and win it this year and stuff like that. And fair play, just whether you agree with some of the signings coming in or you don't, that's a different conversation. But at least money's being spent, and at least there's an onus there on you to try and do it and stuff like that. And we're the same, and I think there's a real responsibility on all those clubs to make sure that this becomes a really, really competitive league again. And it's otherwise we're in danger of ending up like the French league, where you just have PSG and everyone else, and it'd be sad if it went that way.
No, 100%, mate, because they're quite a distance in front. But the thing is, they seem to be offloading a lot of players, do City.
Yeah.
So, and I know they've signed this Croatian guy, the centre back. But other than that, I don't know if they signed any other players.
Kovacic, they got Kovacic off Chelsea in the midfield, didn't they?
That's right. Yeah, they did.
Yeah, and they've a few other on the cards as well, but they've got some quality there as well. But the one thing that Man City do that the rest of us don't do is Man City never look at the names on the jerseys. Pep doesn't look at the name on the jersey. Pep just takes a player out, that player goes. It's not a problem. There's no upheaval. There's no issue. And he just brings another player in, and it's back to business, and this is what we expect. And I think that's where we sometimes fall down. Like if you look at Jordan Henderson leaving this week and all the hassle that's come out of that, how could he leave us, and all that experience, and, what's the LGBTQ community all going to do, and all this kind of stuff and all. And I'm there thinking about 20 players have gone to Saudi Arabia this summer probably. And the biggest deal is Jordan Henderson. They're trying to make him out to be the devil that is left for hell or something like that. And I'm there going, he made a decision based on his family, a financial decision. Get over it. Move on. Let's not make this a bigger thing than it is. Let's go out and sign the player that needs to be signed to replace that player, and let's get on with it. That's what Man City do. Look at what Man City do. If they were losing Haaland tomorrow, I lay odds Haaland would leave, and another player comes in, and it's back to business again. That's the way they operate. It's just like a factory, like a conveyor belt in a factory. Just keeps on rolling, keeps on going. They don't make a big deal about anything. Vincent Kompany left the club. Fernandinho left the club. All these great players left the club. Look at what he did mid-season with Cancelo. Yeah, go ahead. You can head off to Bayern Munich. It doesn't matter. Look what they did. They went on and won a treble. And he was touted as one of the best players in the league at the time. You're not happy with the way things are going here? See you later. And then they just go on about their business again. Look what he did. He made superstars out of Nathan Ake and Akanji and all these players that were bang average playing at Bournemouth and stuff like that. Now they're absolutely sensational players. You know what I mean? And it's just this is what he does. Whereas I think we get a bit more romantic and we get a bit more pinned down to the name on the jersey as opposed to the output and the purpose and the result of what we want from it. And it just gets a bit too sentimental at times. But I suppose it's a cultural thing as well, where we're kind of different clubs with different history, with different kind of backbones and foundations that we were built on. And Man City at the moment is trying to get to that point by building their history now. And it's kind of a different environment. I'm sure both our clubs, when we were trying to generate that history we wanted to generate, we were ruthless in the way we did things. Somewhere along the line, I describe us as becoming soft. People asked me this summer, who do I want us to bring in? I said, we need to bring in a few destroyers And we need to bring in a few lads that are just absolute bastards, absolute hard-nosed lads that need to come in. None of this softly, touchy stuff anymore. That's no good.
Because every great team has to have a player like that.
Yeah.
When you look back at Liverpool's history, you had Steve McMahon and you had Graham Souness.
Yeah.
Both
Destroyers.
of them destroyers. You have to have players like that. Because otherwise teams will just walk right through you.
Yeah. Yeah, you need that. And that's what at times we've been missing. And when we have been successful, that's at times when we've kind of had a little bit of that, you know. We had a little bit of that Fabinho when he was at his peak. He was quite a destroyer and stuff like that. He was really, really good. Milner, when we used him, Milner was kind of like that in a cheeky kind of way. He always got away with it and he never got booked because he just smiled at the ref. But he was a destroyer at times. But yeah, we just need more of that. We need to get back being serious about football and about winning things and about, you know, every match, every result, every goal, every win, every draw is a prisoner, you know, that kind of way. And that drive and that mentality to do what needs to be done, you know, is really, really important. And that's kind of over the last few years what we've been lacking, you know. And if you look at City this year, they're going to go for 4 in a row and stuff like that, you know. So kind of things, if they start doing that, where does it end? Who's going to be the team that's going to shape up and actually lay down a marker for them? You guys tried it last year and unfortunately fell slightly short. No one more than me, and I'm not even an Arsenal fan, wanted Arsenal to win the league last year.
Because the thing is, the longer it goes on, the more difficult it's going to get to stop them.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? Because
that's my fear. That's what I'm saying to you. My fear at the moment is that I'm at the start of another 30-year cycle. And I don't know what I have 30 years left in me to wait for another league win. So we need to shape up, get it sorted.
Yeah, exactly. Because, like, if they go and do 4 in a row, then, you know, people will there will be this aura about them that they're invincible. And it started already.
Yeah.
People are going, I've heard fans from our club saying, oh, yeah, well, it's Man City. You're not going to beat them. But Brentford did it twice last season.
We bet them twice. We bet them twice and they bet us twice. Yeah.
Yeah. So,
they can be beaten, but it's just...
them. But there are fans in our fan base who think they're invincible. And if they go and do 4 and then 5, there will be that mentality will spread to other clubs. Do you know what I mean? And people will be going, you can't catch them.
Yeah. And because they're so ruthless as well, like, you know what I mean? Like, would you put it beyond Pep this year to try and go for a quad? Would you put it beyond Pep to try and go invincible in the league? That's the drive that he has there. I don't know if you were looking, was the Champions League was the last one that they won, wasn't it? When the final whistle went on the Champions League when they had won it, go back and look at the footage of Pep. Do you know where Pep is when the final whistle went? He's sitting down with the guy that has the iPad and they're discussing formations at full time after winning the Champions League. No. This is what we're up against. It's absolutely crazy. It's a ruthlessness and a drive. And talk about money all you want. Talk about sports washing all you want. Talk about all those other things. There is a ruthless drive. I seen that guy. We were 10 minutes away or 12 minutes away from winning the league. And I seen Pep Guardiola make a change in his team. And within 12 minutes, they had whipped the league off us when they were playing against Stevie's Aston Villa. And at that stage, I seen it unfolding. I seen what he was doing. And I was down on my knees praying to God, praying to the 97 up in heaven, praying to anyone I could. Stevie, just get Villa to hold out. Just do whatever you can and stuff like that. We were 12 minutes away from winning the league. And I firmly believe if we had won the league that season, we would have went on and won the quad. Because the wave of winning, we would have brought that into the Champions League final. We would have beaten Real Madrid. I'm nearly sure of it. And we just couldn't hold out. But when he brought Gundogan on and changed the formation, and then he scored the goal and stuff like that, and I just thought, that's unbelievable what he did. To have cojones that big, to be that controlled in that moment with 12 minutes to go and the league slipping away from you, to be able to do that, unbelievable. Wow.
It is unbelievable because
incredible.
I remember that season, and I've said it a number of times to people. Don't forget, Liverpool were 2 games away from winning the quad.
Yeah, played
That's
every
the-
minute of every game. Played every minute of every game that season that we could. Yeah.
And like, you won the FA Cup, you won the League Cup, you were like you said, 12 minutes away from winning the league, and then you lost in the Champions League final. And that Champions League final, it should have been abandoned and replayed on another day, in my opinion.
Because of the stuff that went on.
Chaos outside. It was shocking.
Yeah. That kind of stuff, isn't it mad the way that kind of stuff can just follow a club? And I'm sure all clubs have their bad luck and stuff happens and stuff like that. But it just seems to follow us at times in those key moments. Like players' families and relations and all outside being tear gassed and all sorts of stuff. And then, of course, people turn around and it's, Liverpool fans again, always the victims, this kind of stuff, the usual crap that comes out. And then we find out afterwards it was nothing to do with us at all. We were attacked and the whole thing was a farce and stuff like that and all. And then to play the game, and we actually played so well at times. Like, I mean, Courtois was their man of the match. We absolutely battered them at times. And then people don't forget as well that we played with a Thiago and a Fabinho that were both injured. They took pain shots prior to the final and stuff like that and all. It just wasn't meant to be. And I tell you, to watch a parade with 2 domestic cups was so tough. So tough. And we showed what we were about, 700,000-800,000 people lined the streets of Liverpool to bring the lads back and give them a lift. We knew how down they were going to be. And people questioned all those kind of things, like, why would you be having a parade for 2 domestic cups after losing the league and the Champions League? But I think the people of Liverpool recognised that the team needed a lift, that the team was really, really down. And that's why they lined the streets. It wasn't necessarily to celebrate the 2 domestic cups. It was to give the team the lift that they needed. I'm sure those players, that's the last place they wanted to be that day. But the fans came out to show their support for the team. It was a tough journey for us. It was a season that promised so much. You know, and you came 3rd and 4th in a 4-horse race, basically. You know what I mean? It was a tough one, you know, really, really tough.
It was. But the thing is, like, putting aside the fact that you'd lost the league and that you'd lost the Champions League, the fact, that attitude about, not wanting to celebrate the 2 cup wins because of what happened in the league and the Champions League says a lot about the mentality of the club. Why that the club will always, in the short term, be striving for excellence, because if Tottenham had won the League Cup and the FA Cup, they would have been going on about it for 50 years.
They'd be still in the parade. The parade would be still going on. They would have never got off the bus. They'd be still on the bus.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So that's what I'm talking about. Do you know, there's other clubs out there that would have been going absolutely ballistic about it. You know, because it is a big achievement winning the 2 domestic cups. You know, winning the FA Cup and League Cup in one season. It's a hard thing to do. But, you know, it just shows what a great club Liverpool is because of the way that they reacted to it. So, talking about that, who do you think Liverpool's greatest ever team was, Niall?
I've got 2 for you because I can't separate them.
Right, go on.
So I'll give you the 2. The first one is the 83-84 team. Yeah. I'll bring it up here to talk to you about it because it was just, where are we? 83-84. Let's see, can I find it here now? Because I had it earlier. Hang on, maybe I've gone by it. There we go. 83-84 was quite a special team for me, and it was again the teams that are my favourite teams are generally the teams that have that little sprinkling of Irish through them as well. So there's that connection with me as well, and rightly so. But if you look at that, the 83-84 team, you had Bruce in nets. It was an absolute lunatic, of course, as we know. Met him, and he's as much a lunatic as he was back then. Even when you go and meet him now, I have a couple of gloves on the drawer there signed by him, and he's a hell of a guy. But Lawrenson was in the team, Phil Neal was in the team, Hansen, Kennedy, Souness in the middle of the field with Lee. What two destroyers they were! You had the wings of Johnson and Whelan. You remember Craig Johnson with the hair, of course. He had the hair like your old friend Guendouzi. That was the way his hair was and stuff like that. But then you had a front line kind of made up. You Johnson and Whelan on the wings, and then you had Rush with Dalglish in the kind of pocket. And what a team that was! Absolutely sensational. And went on to win the treble, no less. The league, the European Cup, and the League Cup. Not the treble. A treble, was absolutely fabulous. It was a great team. The other one I have for you, which is kind of unique as well, is the 87-88 team, which to me is just sensational as well. Well, I bring it up here as well for you, jog my memory. I remember picking it out.
Was that the team that had the silver away kit? No.
It could be if my memory serves me right. That was again Gobbler and Nets, but again we had that sprinkling of Irish about it. If you remember '88, we went into the Euros as well. Who'll forget Ray Houghton and Ronnie Whelan and players like that and stuff. But that team at the time, if you think about our back line, Hansen was there, Gillespie, Stevie Nicol, absolutely outstanding. Ablett was there as well. John Barnes was in there as well. What a player John Barnes was. Absolutely sensational. To see John Barnes pick up a ball and to be in full flow with a ball and such control is just it's the thing that dreams are made of. McMahon was in there, Jan Molby, of course, helping out here, and then a front line of Aldridge and Beardsley, which were absolutely sensational as well. So they're my two favorite teams. Again, that little sprinkling of Irish through them, but again, you had your great defense, your crazy goalkeeper, you had sensational midfield there made up out of talent with wide men and stuff like that, but destroyers in the middle as well. I can't imagine the fear that ran through people when they realised Steve McMahon was marking them.
No,
it must be terrifying. Yeah. Absolutely terrifying, and it was just absolutely sensational.
So, in that team, who you said you couldn't separate him? Is that the fact?
Yeah.
Out of those two, who would you say is your favourite player in those two teams?
Probably Hansen. Hansen probably in there because I always move towards defenders and goalkeepers. Of course, I loved Gobbler. Who couldn't love Bruce Gobbler and all? But he always put the fear of God in me as well. I always felt there was like he didn't let us down too many times, but you always felt not. I won't say similar to David James because he wasn't as erratic, but he was one of those crazy guys, who'd pick up the ball and run out with it and do all those kind of things, and there was just in both those teams, there was a level of kind of shenanigans and shithousery, and had all those different things in it as well that really frustrated teams when we came up against them. I mean, John Aldridge was absolutely sensational, Peter Beardsley and stuff like that, Steve McMahon. But yeah, Hansen is probably. I mean, obviously Dalglish and Rush in the first one. Stand out as well. Like how do you pick them? Tell me, how do I pick a player? I suppose you have to pick Hansen because Hansen is in both teams and Gobbler. But that's the only consistent thing really in it and stuff like that. But
the ironic thing for me is, I reckon if Grobbelaar was at his peak now, he would be a phenomenal goalkeeper. Not that he wasn't then. But all this business about bringing it out, like goalkeepers being a sweeper and all this carry on, he would have been in his element.
Yeah.
He would have. Do you know what I mean? Because he used to do all that all the time. But it was deemed as being crazy because no one else was doing it. But yet now, everyone's doing it. So
or everyone wants them to do it now. Gobbler is one of those keepers who, he probably should have been an outfield player, but maybe stumbled across a set of goalkeeping gloves one day and became a keeper. Because he wanted to spend more time outside of his box than inside of his box and stuff like that. Get me plenty of them. I suppose the one thing about following Liverpool when you watch them, like, we never do things too easy. So you age rapidly as a Liverpool fan. They carve years off your life because we're always either involved in a last day scenario or a penalty shootout or a last minute free kick or a comeback that seems insurmountable. And like, we never do things easy, I mean, we never go out and hammer a team like 5 or 6-0 in the first leg, and then the second leg it's all handy and we can coast it. We always create a stick to beat ourselves on the back with and stuff like that and all, So Brucey, I said it when I met Brucey a couple of times to get gloves signed. I said, you aged me rapidly, but I still love you for it, I said to him, and he just laughed and all, So, but he's a gas guy, he's a head case still, Meet him on a couple of the Legends tours and stuff, and he's just crazy. But he was definitely a guy who he was never destined to be a goalkeeper. He was supposed to be an outfield player. He just became a keeper.
The next Beckenbauer, that's for sure. So who do you think was Liverpool's worst ever team? No.
This is probably not the worst team on paper, but it's the team that probably let me down the most, that I had most hope for. And it's the 95-96 one. We remember the white suits. We remember the FA Cup final. Cantona with that late winner. But it was a team, when I looked at it, there was a lot of really, really good players in it at the time, and it kind of gave me hope that we could really go and do something, and at times we were really good in the season, but we kind of whittled away, and it was so disappointing. I thought we would have laid down a marker, and I thought we had brought in the right bits to do the right things, and we started getting labelled the Spice Boys. There was a lot of stuff coming out about the partying, lads dating different girls off pop bands and groups and stuff like that and all. And somewhere along the way, we lost our way.
Who was the manager of that team now?
I think it was, if I'm right, I think it was Roy, was it? I'll tell you now. I'm really sure it was Roy Evans. Yeah, Roy Evans. Roy Evans, yeah, that's what was so weird about it as well, because you had the legacy of the boot room was in charge, but not the boot room mentality, and that's what it kind of lacked. And I think what happened was Roy's a lovely man. I've met him a couple of times, and he was actually at the British Open today. He was at the golf with his son, and he was posting up stuff and all, and I was commenting on it, saying to have a great day and stuff like that. There's always a fondness with Liverpool fans for Roy Evans, because he's such a nice guy, and I think that was the problem when he became manager and stuff like that. When you're part of that boot room and you were brought up on absolute destroyers. Like, think about the people that were involved in the boot room, the Paisleys and the Shankleys and the Fagans and the Ronnie Morans and all these different guys and all, and then you've Roy Evans, which is as sweet as can be, And I just think he went on a kind of a roller coaster ride where it became very tough for him and stuff like that and all, and I just think he was probably just a bit too nice, to be honest. But yeah, you look at who was in there. When I look at the 95-96 one, you Jones in there, Bob and McIntyre to come in. John Scales was in the central defence. Ruddock had kind of pushed out a little bit and stuff like that. Mark Wright was in there, who was a sensational defender. Scales came in. I think Scales was at Wimbledon, if I'm right. We signed him from Wimbledon, I think, John Scales. He was very good player at Wimbledon as well. With Jones on one side, McIntyre on the other side. And then if you look at the 5 across the line, we had a 5 across the line of Barnes and Redknapp. And then we had McManaman in the middle, and then Fowler and Collymore either side of him. So it was a very, very strong side. And the potency of goals that could come there. Redknapp with his free kicks. Collymore was quite the goal scorer. We knew what we were getting with Fowler and McManaman. Barnes was still in there, even though it was kind of starting to tail off a little bit there with John. But we still had a really solid team. But again, our crutch was our goalkeeper, David James, and just spilled it too much and let in too much at times and stuff like that. And we often found ourselves trying to outscore teams and stuff like that, and sometimes it just didn't happen. But I always remember the 4-3 against Newcastle where Collymore scored and he went off on that mad run. Remember he went off on that mad run and stuff like that. And I think that was the year we wore the red kit as well, didn't it? With the big corduroy collar was on it, I think that was that year as well. Yeah, so yeah, it was that was the team I think disappointed me the most in terms of it didn't achieve anything and stuff like that, you know.
So going to like the situation that you're in, and you know you're living in the Republic of Ireland, what's it like for you when you do come over to a game to the UK? What's involved and what's the story like? Because I've heard Del Boy talking about it, and I've heard Carl talking about it, and like the shenanigans they have to get up to in hotels and like aeroplane tickets and buses, and it just sounds an absolute horrendous nightmare. So can you tell me about what it's like for you, Niall?
Yeah, I suppose it gets back to the debate again about like whether you're a real fan or not a real fan and all this kind of thing. For me to go over to a game, it's probably going to cost me about 500 quid. At least 500 quid, I'd say, because what I do is we normally go over on the boat. So we'll do the sail and rail. So we'll get the boat over to Holyhead, and then we get the train up to Chester, and then the Mersey rail into Liverpool Central. Then you book a hotel. We normally go for two nights or 3 nights. We normally make a weekend of it. And then you have your match ticket on top of that, and your food and your drink and your socialising. And then if you're going to pick up a bit of merchandise or, you know, a few little bits and stuff like that, typically what we'll do is we'll go over, we'll check into the hotel. I always go to the Shankly for the breakfast. Big shout out to the Shankly Hotel for the breakfast. It's without a doubt, folks, the best breakfast in Liverpool. It's unbelievable, Warren. I've never experienced a breakfast like it. They have absolutely everything. I'm not sure if the pudding is Clonakilty though. That's the only thing, but it's still decent. But yeah, they put on a great breakfast and stuff like that and all. And then, you know, we'll soak in the atmosphere around the town. We go to a couple of the pubs. We visit Jurgen's. We go to the Beer Killer, which is a big bar there on Liverpool 1, and they've all pool tables and dartboards, and it's great fun and stuff like that. We'll soak in the atmosphere down at the square. Then we'll head up to the ground. And we go to the Albert and we go to the park. We'll head to the park first, and we go in there. There'll just be a lot of Norwegian fans and visiting fans and stuff like that, and we share stories with them, and they tell us about how some of them come over and they actually they book a private plane. They have people coming over, maybe 200 people coming over to a match. And what they do is they book their own private plane there and back for the 200 people and stuff like that. And also pretty cool. Some of the stories come out of there. Then we go over to the Albert and we'll share a few stories, and they have a band playing and the music's playing. And like I said, we always visit the memorial and we do our thing there. And then we go up and we wait for the bus to arrive. We welcome the bus in, or we might go down to a hotel. This is Anfield, and Jamie Webster might be down there playing a concert to boost us and get us going before the game starts. And we'll head up, welcome the bus in, and then head into the ground and soak in the atmosphere, and then hopefully go away with a win and stuff like that and be very, very happy. And then we head back, go out that night and stuff like that. And all. So it's tough going, and it can be tough. I remember one time I went over for a Watford game and we did the day trip. So we went over early on the boat. The bus drops us off in the city. Then we meet the bus later on and we head up to the ground. We were playing Watford. I was really looking forward to it. Troy Deeney was at his peak at the time, and I think we beat them either 5 or 6-0 or something like that. We absolutely destroyed them. Mo Salah that night was absolutely sensational. He absolutely tore Watford asunder with his pace. And I remember we were sitting up in the new Kenny Dalglish stand, I think it is, and we were up in the clouds. I like, if you have vertigo, you're in trouble in this stand. And we were right up. I think we were 10 rows from the back. And it was literally like watching a Subbuteo game, but we loved it. The atmosphere was unbelievable. The cop was in full voice. And then we had to go out then. And we had to find the bus to get back to the boat and all that kind of stuff and all. But that was a tough one. We were we were traveling basically no sleep for 24 hours, basically, you know, get the boat over. We didn't get back till 6 o'clock the next morning. We were on the boat at 6 o'clock the previous morning for that Watford game and stuff like that. But great fun, and it's great over there. The atmosphere is brilliant, and there's a couple of lads over there I know now that do the stalls, and they have all the, you know, the plaques and the pictures and the merchandise and all, and the badges. You always pick up a badge for the game as a memory and all that kind of stuff. And like I said, you pick up the scarf and lay the scarf at the memorial and all that kind of stuff. So we have a kind of a routine that we do. It's not set in stone, but yeah, no, it's good. Good. I love doing it. I'm always excited going over for a game. It's really, really exciting, and it's there's nothing like it when you walk into Anfield. Anfield is, when people talk about the atmosphere at Anfield and the stadium and stuff like that, it's incredible. Absolutely incredible.
It sounds amazing, and I've heard it. I've been to Anfield to see Arsenal once.
Yeah.
In a League Cup game, the year we won the title at your place. Earlier in the season, we went to Anfield for a League Cup match, and it was a 1-1 draw. John Barnes scored for Liverpool, and Rocky Rocastle, God rest his soul, smashed one in from outside the box as well. So 2 great goals as well, I hasten to add. But it was a great night, great atmosphere, and good banter as well. So it was great fun. But listen, guys, please make sure you subscribe to the Upper Tier YouTube channel. That's Niall's channel. He's a mad, passionate Liverpool fan, as you can see, and his knowledge about football and Liverpool is off the scale. So, especially if you're a Liverpool fan, go and make sure you check out his channel. But even if you're not, he's got lots of stuff on there about general football. He also does stuff. He's been doing a lot of stuff recently about wrestling as well. So go and make sure you check out his channel because he's absolutely brilliant. I can't recommend it highly enough. There's a link for his channel in the description of the video, and there's also a link for it in the which is the pinned comment in the live chat. So all you need to do is just click on his link and it will take you to his channel. So please make sure you go and check him out. And so, Niall, if we look forward now to football these days and whatnot, what do you think about what do you think can be done to improve modern football?
I think they're going to have to figure out a way to regulate the financial side of football. I think we're in danger of football losing its essence, as I call it, through the financial situation. I think football, the way it has gone, has kind of lost its way a little bit. So I think the financial side of things, I think needs to be figured out a little bit better. I think from the officiating and the VAR side of things, I think that needs to be ironed out as well and fixed. I think it's very, very frustrating, and I think the way it operates in its current guise sucks the joy out of football, because now no one celebrates a goal until 2 minutes later, and by then the moment is lost. And I think that's they're kind of 2 key things there for me as well. I think also as well in terms of continued huge investment in the youth situation, grassroots football and stuff like that can't be forgotten about. And I think that's the fear. As you know, I did a show the other night on Saudi Arabia and stuff like that, and what's evolving there and stuff like that. And it's when you delve down into it and you look at what's going on in football, and I look at a lot of the different documentaries, the dark side of football and all that kind of stuff, and I'm very, very intrigued and interested in the background business of football and how that all operates as well. And I think that's where my concerns kind of lie and stuff like that. The shenanigans that goes on there financially and stuff like that, and how it's today's news and tomorrow's acceptance. You know what I mean? I think what's happening at the moment, the way football is evolving and the way the links, the spider's web as we call it and stuff like that is very concerning. I think there's no responsibility anymore for getting things wrong. I think when we get things wrong now, I think there's more of just an acceptance that yeah, sure, we reminisce how this is the way it used to be and all this kind of thing. And there's no fallout from it. You know what I mean? There's, like if you go out and you sign a player and that player doesn't work out, there's no responsibility anymore. If you've got links with Saudi Arabia or Qatar or whatever it is, and you can just bin that player off there and get back basically the money you paid and stuff like that. There's no responsibility for getting that wrong and how to fix it and stuff like that. We all came into this window thinking what a task Chelsea was going to have on their hands to try and fix up the mess that they created from last year and stuff like that. And then we find out that, there's a massive investment there in the background from Saudi Arabia, and all of a sudden the players are pouring out there. So there's no consequences to that anymore. You know what I mean? They can just send 5, 6, 7 players out to Saudi Arabia, recoup the money that they invested, and go again like nothing ever happened. Whereas if that's my club or your club, we're in serious trouble. We got to try and there's a consequence to us getting it wrong. If you get your signings wrong this summer, you bring in Havertz and Rice and whoever else you're bringing in, Timber and these players. If that goes wrong, there's a consequence to that. In other clubs, if that goes wrong, there's no longer a consequence, because you can just move that player out, bring another player in. And also, if you're linked to these clubs as well, you can just get those clubs to buy top stars and bring them in on loan. So you're constantly circumventing FFP and the rules of the game, and not only the rules of the game and the financial rules of the game, but the essence of the game. If you could sit there, say, as Newcastle United, not have to spend the money you have to spend on an Mbappe and bring him in through the back door on loan from a Saudi club, if that was the case, that signals to me there's something wrong with football if that can be allowed to go on. And listen, we know what's gone on with UEFA and with FIFA and all this stuff that's carried on. We've seen the documentaries on the court cases and all that kind of stuff. So we know at the very core of football that there's a badness there when you bite into it. And that all needs to be figured out as well, because I always I said it the other night, even on the show, for me, the consequences of what's going on in football now is being felt by the 6 and the 7-year-old who's kicking the ball against a wall, who will one day dream of scoring at the Stratford end, or scoring at the Cop end, or scoring at whatever end for each of your clubs and stuff like that and all. And that's what's getting tarnished at the moment. That 6-year-old, suddenly that's all going to change, and then you're no longer a human, you're a commodity. And that's a very dangerous world to move into, when the human element of what we do gets sucked out of it, and you just become a commodity or a cog in a wheel, and you're just picked in and out and stuff like that and all. And it's that's why we have such a wave now at the moment of mental health with young players and players that don't make it and stuff like that and all, and they're just binned off and they're not helped, and you know what I mean. And that's the wave that's coming, and we're only tipping the tip of the iceberg at the moment. It's going to come hot and heavy and big and fast. And these kids now that are being paid millions and millions and millions and sent out into the world, and their world is now Instagram and TikTok and Bugattis and Lamborghinis and all that kind of stuff. Down the road, there'll be a consequence to that, and we haven't seen it yet. And that's my fear in football.
No, and because I think it could end up killing it. I really do, because, it will come so far removed and detached from reality that young kids will not be able to relate to it. So they'll find other things to go and do. Yeah. Rather than like playing football. And then when that starts happening, it's a slippery slope. It really is, Yeah. So when we're talking about the modern game and so on, and we've talked about great teams of the past, and we've talked about great players and whatnot, but in terms of Liverpool's greatest ever manager, Niall, I was on the channel once, there was a big debate between some Liverpool fans about who was better between Shankly and Paisley. Where would you stand on that argument?
Bob Paisley is our greatest ever manager, but Bill Shankly is the man who laid the foundation for Bob Paisley's success. So that's the only way I can describe it. I named the podcast after the great man. He was the man. He was the man who in somewhat where we lost our identity and stuff like that. You know what I mean? When you think back to Shankly and what he put in place and what he demanded, and on the steps of the steps at Liverpool there, what he said about what a privilege it is for those people to play for this club who represent you and all that kind of stuff and all, he really laid the foundation for what it meant and how important it is when you pull on that jersey to understand what it means. And even these days now, it means even more when you think about the legacy and the history that we carry. It's not easy to put on that jersey and carry it the way you should, but it's also, you have to understand what it means to put that on, what it means to walk out that tunnel, what it means to touch that sign, and how important it is. And for so many years, we had so many people doing that who weren't qualified to park cars in the car park. And that's why we found ourselves in that 30-year situation, And I think, as I said to you earlier, now we're on the cusp of a watershed moment in football where, as I said, a number of teams need to fix up and look at their history and what they're about and how serious they are about football. And we're as much that club as anyone else. And I think we all have a role to play in restoring football back to the thing that we love, that we've kind of lost. As I said to you, when our team scores a goal, we don't know whether it's going to count or not. It takes too long. Everything is just drawn out, and then it loses the joy of it. You know what I mean? We love football because we celebrate our teams. We celebrate those moments. These are moments we carve out in our life, and those moments get taken away from us. To the point where you're not allowed to enjoy it anymore. Are you going to be able to go to a game? Do we see a situation in years to come where stadiums are just full of hospitality boxes? And there's no more terraces. There's no more, that football fan who goes there and, he invests. It's a big part of his life. You know what I mean? I say to people all the time, if you follow a club, I spoke about it in the Ireland podcast that we did with the jersey weighing so heavy and stuff like that. The football and your football team gives you hope. It dictates how your week and your life is going to go. It dictates your mood. You know it and I know it. We've seen it with our reactions to football results and matches and stuff like that and all. If your team wins at the weekend, you're on top of the world. If your team loses at the weekend, you don't even want to watch Match of the Day. You don't want to know. And that's the effect that your club has on you. And, that affects a lot of people even into the middle of their work week and stuff like that and how productive they are and all that kind of thing. You're either going into work to get bantered and slaughtered, or you're going into work to pep in your step and you're ready to face that week and be really, really productive because your team has done the business and your players have represented you and all that kind of stuff. And I think sometimes that's lost. I think sometimes you look at football at the moment and people think that it starts at the first whistle and it ends on the 90th minute. And for a lot of people, it's so much more than that. So much more than that. Look at us. We create content every week. We spend hours on YouTube creating content because we love our teams and we love football. People don't realise the effort sometimes that goes into actually being a football fan.
No, it's 100% true, mate. And, a lot of these clubs have got great histories that are deeply rooted in the local communities. And, and I know for a fact it's the case with Liverpool. I know it's the case with Manchester United. I know it's the case with Arsenal. I know it's the case with Rangers and Celtic. It's deeply, deeply rooted in these communities. And I agree with you, Niall, that we're coming to a point now where that connection could be lost permanently if we're not careful. And it just becomes another commodity or another entertainment outlet, like Netflix or something like that. It's just, and I think it's wrong. I do, because these clubs do so much good work in their communities. Yeah. And they're a cornerstone of their communities. And, you can't. I'm just really worried about it now. I have to say I'm very, very concerned because I don't think that people really understand how what an important role these clubs play in their communities. And if we're not careful, it's gonna just collapse.
Well, you've only got to look at the pandemic, Warren. Remember when the pandemic happened and we'd no football? Just think about how empty people's lives were. Think about how communities struggled because they didn't have it. Think about the mental health issues that people had because they didn't have that outlet to give out that energy every week in terms of the football match or following your club or any of that kind of information, how tough it was and stuff like that. And also, it's only when you don't have it. It's amazing even footballers coming out talking about when fans weren't in the stadium, just how different it was. You know, you could hear a pin drop and all these kind of things and all, you know, and it's the fans that are the heartbeat of the club, and it's often forgotten. You've seen it with our own owners, how they disregarded the fans and the community with some of the decisions they made, and then they come out with appalling apologies and all, like as if it's okay while you're sitting there on your $1 billion yacht explaining why you tried to trademark Liverpool or trademark Anfield or all these kind of things, or you decided to bring us down the road of a Super Cup. And not getting any kind of feedback or interaction from the people who really matter. And they'll learn from it. I mean, at the end of the day, you know, we don't tell millionaires what to do. Millionaires don't tell billionaires what to do, and billionaires don't tell trillionaires what to do. And that's the reality of the financial model in the world. It's very, very simple. But the sad thing is, look at that picture that's on your screen there as well. All those people holding up those scarves. They're generally the reason why people become millionaires and billionaires. And that shouldn't be forgotten, you know.
100%, mate. So let's move on and briefly have a chat about international football, if you don't mind, Niall.
Do we have to?
No, we don't, if you don't want to. I wanted to ask about your experiences of watching international football, because I don't know if you're aware, I was at the famous game in '88 in Stuttgart when, when your man scored that great goal for Ireland against England. I was there, mate. But what's your experiences and memories of watching international football?
I said it to you on the shows that we did as well. I've such great memories of international football, and I fully can see it and fully remember the difference international football made to this country and lifting us out of the doldrums. We were in very serious financial trouble. We were in a depression. As I said to you earlier, if you had clothes on your back and food on the table, you were winning. And I remember the lift we got out of football. '88 was just sensational for us. I remember going to the matches. I'm sure you remember the inflatable bananas and all that were around at the time and all. And I've told stories how I used to go to the matches, and after the match we'd go to UCD, our second biggest university in the country. And in the middle of that, it's just up the road from Lansdowne Road, not too far away. And in the middle of it, there's a lake. And all the supporters would meet there and go into that lake on the bananas like kayaks after the game, celebrating. And it was bedlam, and the security guards were running around trying to get us out of this lake. And this is how we would celebrate. It was absolutely mental. I remember the Walkinstown. I'll send you a clip later of the Walkinstown roundabout when we were celebrating winning games and stuff like that during that time. And there's a famous roundabout, the Walkinstown roundabout, and a couple of pubs around it, and the people are out in their droves and they're going by on top of car bonnets, and the beeping is going and the flags are everywhere, and you know, Jack was just incredible and stuff like that. And then we went into 90 and 94 and all these different tournaments, and it just lifted the country out of the doldrums. But the memories were sensational, like John Aldridge going ballistic on the sideline in America, and Jack burnt to a crisp, and Steve Staunton looking for factor 150 to stop him blistering up in the sun, and Jack wearing the short sleeve shirt and the baseball cap. He looked like one of those officials from an NFL game nearly and stuff like that and all. And it was mad. And just the stories were brilliant and all. You know, Jack used to love coming over. He loved the fly fishing and he loved the Guinness. And, you know, his heart was in the right place. He was absolutely sensational. He's an honorary Irish man for us. But his his part that he played in giving us back a sense of pride, and that we weren't just this little island. The stop off before heading to New York, basically, that we actually had a role to play, and the trickle down effect of that was amazing, Warren. The foreign direct investment that came in from the US companies and stuff like that, and they seen Ireland as a key location and all, and our economy was built on that kind of thing and all. But that's all down, no matter what anyone tells you. A lot of that is down to Jack Charlton. A lot of that success is down to Jack Charlton. There's no doubt about it. I remember 88. It was unfortunate for me because 88 I was doing my intercert, which would have been, I'm not sure what levels it is in the UK, and then 90 I was doing my leaving cert, which would have been the higher levels or whatever. So I was in the midst of 2 exam runs when 88 and 90 happened. But I never missed a game and stuff like that. And I remember pennies, it was Primark. We're shipping out all the different shirts. I had a Kevin Sheedy shirt and all, and it was so weird. I was a Liverpool fan and I was an Irish fan wearing a Kevin Sheedy shirt and all, and the stick I used to get and all, and it was just amazing. And just after every game, I don't know if you've ever watched the movie The Van.
What film?
The Van.
No, I haven't. No.
If you want to know what football meant to Ireland during that time, watch the movie The Van. It's called VAN. It has Colin Meaney and all is in it, and it's about 2 lads who are following the football, and they invest in a chipper van that they park outside the pub after all these games.
Right.
And absolutely watch it, for Warren. You will absolutely love it. Brendan O'Carroll is in it and all, and it's absolutely mental. And it goes back to the penalty shootout with Packy Bonner and the whole lot and all, and they're pouring drink over their heads and all, celebrating when we were winning and all, and then they pour out of the pub and they're ordering their chips and all this kind of stuff and all. And I'll send you a link to some of the clips from it and stuff like that. But if you ever want to watch a movie that describes what that football time meant to Ireland, it's just it's sensational. They buy this chipper van and they do it up and all. The thing's a wreck. It has no engine. They tow it to the pub with the car and everything and all, and they're cooking chips and all. It's mental. And then they're in just watching the games. It's crazy stuff. But that's exactly what was going on in every pub in Ireland at the time. It was mental stuff. And after every game, there was just cars everywhere, kids out of sunroofs, lads across bonnets. The cars were beeping. Every road was closed off. It was crazy. If you did it now, you'd be arrested. We'd all be in jail. You wouldn't be allowed to, because you're not allowed to celebrate like that now. But it was absolutely mental, and like no one could believe it. So we were just this little small country that was the upstarts in world football, and it was crazy stuff. And we were so close. We were so close.
That's true, and it sounds absolutely mad. Absolute madness. It really does. Getting a chip van without an engine in it.
You want to see it, like, and they come out and they'd be rocking the chip van, it'd be nearly turning over, and it's crazy stuff and all. And I won't spoil it for you, but watch it and you'll be messaging me all next week talking about stuff in it. There's a great scene in it with a priest. And check that out. I'll send you on if I can find a clip later. You won't believe it, but it's unbelievable. I won't spoil it for you, but our viewers know what it is. And when they watch it, they'll know it's madness. You won't believe it. It's crazy.
I'll try and find it. So, moving on, how do you feel about the League of Ireland? I'm not going to ask you about the national team at the moment, or talk to you about John Delaney or the national team or whatnot, because we've spoke about it.
We wrote that book. Book
exactly. But how do you feel about the League of Ireland now?
I haven't kind of like I think it's a very, very tough one, really, because I think the league has always struggled. I think for one reason or another, either financially or historical stuff that has happened and stuff that shouldn't have happened and all. I think the league just really, really struggles. I know a lot of fans who are fans of it and stuff like that and who follow it. My local team would be Bray Wanderers. And some of the agents that are in there, Devlin will be in there and stuff like that. These are the guys that would have been involved with Damien Duff heading over and all that kind of stuff. But it's a real tough one when I go to look at Bray Wanderers and stuff like that. It's basic enough, you know what I mean? And it hasn't changed, it hasn't evolved, it hasn't had the financial clout to evolve. And a lot of the clubs are like that, you know. As I said, I think there's probably only maybe one or two teams that are actually professional in the league. Most of the lads playing in the league, you know, they're doing one or two jobs and they're going playing their football and stuff like that, which is, you know, it's commendable, but it's not a recipe for success, really. You know, it's a struggle and stuff like that. And what you have is, I mean, I grew up in an area not too far away from where Shamrock Rovers used to play, and that great ground in Milltown where they were creating history and stuff like that. I've interviewed a couple of actually their ex-players and stuff like that over time, and but they moved out of there because a developer bought the ground, and the ground is now covered in apartment blocks and big houses and all that kind of stuff. And it's that's the big problem with the League of Ireland at the moment. It's the dollar that drives the decision, and it's so tough. You know, so tough. It's just a very tough one. It's a very tough sell if you're trying to get it across the line to someone to broadcast it. You know, the fans are absolutely sensational. They're really, really passionate. You know, you go to any of the Dublin derbies, they're as good as any derby you'll go to. But they just don't have that financial situation to be able to take it to the next step, and that's always been the case in the league from as long as I can ever remember, you know. And it's unfortunate, you know. Some really good clubs in there and stuff like that. And you think about that league as well, Warren. That league has produced some serious footballers down through the years and stuff like that over a long time and stuff like that, you know. And it's weird, really, when you look at the Irish team into the international scene. You know, a lot of those players start out playing in the League of Ireland and stuff like that, and then they move from there over to the UK and then back as internationals, if you like, and all, you know. So,
do you think it's a problem for it, being that it's so close to probably the richest league in the world?
Well, it wouldn't be.
I'm talking about.
Yeah. I think I think the difficulty is really that in the past, when we were all in the EU and stuff like that, it was much easier. I think it's become a lot more difficult now. And I mean, I think if the League of Ireland, I mean, there hasn't been too many players that came out of the League of Ireland directly into the Irish scene, if you like, directly into the Irish international team. They always kind of circumvent it by being really, really good, being caught by an agent, brought across into the UK, applying their trade at Celtic or in the league or in the championship or whatever it is, and then being picked for the international team. And I think that's the difficulty now is, I think in order to send guys over there now, it's so much more difficult. Even if you're sending academy players over now, I think they have to go over. You have to take out a bond, which is nearly the equivalent of a signing-on fee. Whereas before, prior to kind of Brexit and the rules that came in and stuff like that, you could be sending players across and there was no, you know, there was a certain amount of paperwork and a certain amount of paper trail and stuff like that, but the financial impact wasn't really there. You could send lads over, and if they made it, they made it. If they didn't, they came back. Now, if you're being sent over, there's a big financial implication on the academy side and stuff like that. And then we hear of all this other stuff, like all the sell-on clauses and the buy-on clauses and all this other stuff now that's come into football heavily and stuff like that and all as well. So it's so much more difficult now, you know. But I don't know. It's a difficult dilemma for us as well, because it'd be really, really difficult. I mean, at times we watch the Ireland team play and we think you'd be better off picking the League of Ireland 11 because it gets so bad. But then the reality is that that's not really the case. I know in my time following the Ireland team, the only player I can remember, and that they might correct me if I'm wrong now, your viewers or subscribers, especially the Irish guys, the only player I remember playing in the league, I think, who went directly into the Irish scene, I think Glenn Crowe was one of them. I think he was playing for Bows at the time. He scoring sensational goals and stuff like that, and he got brought in. I think I think it's different during Kenny's time. I think he's been bringing in a few and trying a few different things and stuff like that. But I think Glenn is the only one I remember. Gilesy, of course, went into the fold and stuff like that, but I think he was across the water at that stage, and then he came back and managed Shamrock Rovers, and he created that pathway then, because as he was managing Shamrock Rovers, then he was also heavily involved in the Ireland team, so he gave them a bit of a pathway in. But if you go down through the squads over the years, the Ireland team and stuff like that, there's not a huge amount that came directly in and stuff like that. They always went across the water and played for Leeds and Arsenal and Liverpool and whoever it was, and they're the players that tend to get picked.
Sure. Okay, so no, we're nearly coming to the end now, but to finish up, I want to just talk to you about the upcoming season that we've got coming and your thoughts about it in terms of Liverpool. So what do you think Liverpool need to do in order to be successful in this upcoming season?
Probably need to bring in a central defender still, or decide what they're going to do with the right back situation with Trent and this inversion and all that kind of stuff. Certainly need to bring in one, if not two, more midfielders. And then they probably need to look, depending on what's going to happen. There is talk that maybe more players might go, and there's talk that more players might come in. But I mean, the key thing really is to make sure there's a level of quality on your bench that's kind of not mimics what's on the pitch, because obviously you're never going to get to that point. But at least that the drop off in quality isn't as sensational, if you like, So. You're not taking off a Mo Salah, or a Mo Salah gets injured and you're bringing on the next project kid from the academy or something like that, which does him a disservice, and it doesn't help his development either and stuff like that. I think we need a bit of fixing up. I think we need we need a lot more quality coming in. A lot of people at the moment in our fan base are worried about the numbers that are leaving, like the 11 players, and we've brought in 2. There was a lot of passengers in those 11 players, and then there's a lot of fixing up that has to be done in midfield that should have been done over the last 3 summer windows that was never done, and now it's come up to bite us in the backside basically, and now we have to deal with it. But yeah, I think that's the midfield is obviously the big one, and obviously probably another the central defender, and if they could figure out maybe a right back or something like that, and just lift. I'm hoping there's going to be a spring back from a lot of the players as well. I'm hoping that last season that it was potentially a hangover from that quad season where we played every game and lads had just ran the legs off themselves and stuff like that. And I'm hoping that the likes of Van Dijk and players like that can find form again. Looks like he's going to be our new captain. I'm assuming probably Mo would be the vice captain or something like that. I assume Trent is the captain in waiting over the next 3 years. But I think this is a defining season in terms of the Jurgen Klopp era. My concern about the Jurgen Klopp era is we might look back at it as a missed opportunity. I think when we won the league and we won the Champions League, we had the chance to create a dynasty and go out there and sign what needed to be signed and really keep that going and keep it involved in every window, every transfer window, keep on upgrading. And we didn't do it. We stalled on it. We sat back on our laurels and thinking, should we've won the league and the Champions League? It's all good. We'll just go and do it again. And it doesn't work that way. And I think we've missed the boat again at creating that opportunity to create what I call a dynasty, where, like what Man City is doing at the moment, they're just progressing all the time, winning all the time and stuff like that. We should have been doing that, and it's just, as I said, we just fall short all the time. And I hope we don't fall short this summer, because if we do, we're going to be in serious trouble, because we've only got another 2 seasons after this season with Jurgen Klopp. And I think if potentially we didn't land more silverware, as in a league and a Champions League, top level trophies, not necessarily domestic cups, I think he'll probably look back on his era at Liverpool as being one of disappointment and missed opportunity, more so than success and everything else that comes with it,
And that would be quite sad, because he's done a lot for Liverpool Football Club.
Yeah.
When you look back at it, for me, as an outsider looking in, he I wouldn't say revolutionised the club, but he sort of got it back in touch with what it used to be.
Yeah,
that's the way I feel about it. But in order for this coming season, for you to look back at it as being a success, what would Liverpool need to do in terms of league position or trophies won? What would they need to do, would you say, now?
Well, no less than winning the league and the Europa League. For me, I never reduce down what I expect from the club. I expect my team every week to go out and win the match that they're in. And if you go out and you win and you try and win every match that you're in, you should be in a title race. You should be in a position to win a league and be in a title race and the Europa League as well. So I think anything less than that, I'd be quite disappointed. I know a lot of people are saying, well, it could be transitional because of all the changes and stuff like that. But yeah, you look at last season, I don't think at any stage last season I seen one of my teams going out and I said, we've no chance. I always thought we had a decent chance of winning the matches and stuff like that, even though we fell way short of where we should be. I think there was other factors affecting that as well. I think we had a lot of issues player-wise, we had a lot of issues at management level, and we had a lot of issues on ownership level. But I would never reduce down my expectation of my club to let owners off the hook or a manager off the hook or players off the hook. My expectation this season is to be fully in a title race and win the league, and also do a league and Europa League double. That's what I'm expecting from my team this season, and anything less than that, I'd be pretty disappointed.
No, I agree with you. That's how I feel about it as well. So this is the last question I've got for you now, and it's it's an interesting one for me. If you could change one thing at Liverpool Football Club, right, what would that be?
In its history or right now?
Right now. Right, the club
now.
is now. Not in the history, just if there was one thing that you could do with the way the club is, what would you change about it? If someone was asking me that, I would say our ownership. But what would it be for you?
I suppose the easy go-to is the ownership. If I could change one thing this season, I want our fan base united again. I want us all on the same page, on the same front, supporting the team and stuff like that. Last year we became very fragmented. There was a lot of finger pointing. There was a lot of toxicity and stuff like that. I think as a fan base, I'd like to see that pulled together. I mean, I know most people would say, yeah, well, give me an endless budget or another 10 signings and all that kind of stuff. But if you're practical about it, I'd like the fan base back united again and stuff like that, and closer. I think we came very much apart last season and stuff like that, and I didn't like to see that because of what the fan base and the Liverpool fans mean to me and stuff like that. No, I was very disappointed. And again, like yourself, I've had the benefit of watching the club over 40, 50 years, whatever it is, and stuff like that. And I don't like to see that. I like to see that togetherness, because it is. We often go out into these situations, and it is us versus them at times. You know what I mean? And I think what happens is when you get fragmented like that in the fan base, the owners are sitting back and they're loving it because they're enjoying it, because they're causing this, they're putting it out there. And if we're fighting together, we're not focusing on the things that should be focused on.
See, that's where I think the problem is. That's what's causing these clubs to have these divisions, because this is a modern phenomenon. I don't ever remember experiencing this at any point in the past. I don't remember there being people fighting about the managers or whatnot, or the way the club's being run ever before. And I'm convinced it's been orchestrated by the clubs. This whole concept or idea of divide and conquer, that's what I think it is. Yeah. And it saddens me to hear that it's happening at another club as well. Particularly,
they're doing it at most of them. If you look at most of the clubs, the more time we spend shouting at each other, the less time we spend focusing on what the issues are. And the likes of FSG or the Cronkies or whoever it is, they're sitting back going, this is great. Look at these guys. They're killing each other. And then you get this kind of thing where it's like, sure, look, now listen to them. They want Klopp out. Isn't this great? They don't care about us anymore. They want Klopp out. He can be the fall guy for all this kind of stuff and all. And that's what happened last season. The amount of people wanting Klopp out. For me, he's, top 2-3 manager in the world and stuff like that. How would you replace him? One day we'll have to. I've even been speaking to the fan base this week and stuff through shows and stuff, and they're all losing their mind about the amount of players we're leaving. And I reminded them that, Kenny Dalglish left this club, John Barnes left this club, Steven Gerrard left this club, and one day Mo Salah will leave this club. One day Virgil van Dijk will leave this club. So don't be losing your mind over that. We will replace players, and so long as we're doing the right things and stuff like that, everything should be okay. But yeah, definitely it's deflection and it's the dark arts and stuff like that. And meanwhile, the rich get richer, the poor get poorer, and we're still in the same boat where we're all still infighting and arguing with each other. You know what I mean? And that's the way it is. We spend more time arguing with each other than we do with rival fans. Arsenal fans spend more time giving out to each other than they do giving out to Tottenham. It's madness, isn't it, when you think about it? It's madness when you think about it. It's crazy.
It is. Yeah. Anyway, no, look, listen, thank you so much for spending, 2 3/4 hours chatting to me tonight. Feels like 5 minutes. I could go for another couple of hours. I've really enjoyed chatting to you, so thank you so much. Before we go, can I just ask you to explain to people how they can find you? Tell them about your channel and the things that you get up to on there, and if you've got anything coming up that you want to tell them about. So I'm going to pass over to you now and let you talk about all those things.
Yeah, well, it's the Upper Tier on YouTube, and we're also on Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, Twitter, Amazon Music, Spotify, Google Podcast, anywhere you pick up video footage, social media, audio versions of shows, we're there. Just search the Upper Tier. For the Liverpool fans, it's the Shankly Sessions. That's the playlist that contains all the Liverpool stuff. Daily, I'm putting out latest transfer news, as you said earlier, shorts, all that kind of stuff. Everyone's opinion is more than welcomed. If you want to tell me that I'm stupid, go right ahead. At times I think it myself. Don't worry about that. We all have opinions, and we know what we say about opinions. But yeah, and the show's going out literally every day. We put out shows, be it Liverpool, be it general football shows, sprinkling a pro wrestling in there as well. That's my other favorite thing and stuff like that. And yeah, just previews, reviews. You'll find me on a bunch of other channels as well. I'm generally in Warren's chat or on Warren's shows, or I'll be on Del Boy's chat and stuff like that. I'd be on the Liverpool Lads, Anfield Road TV and all those guys, and Dave's LFC chats and Jamie's channel and stuff like that. We're always on these different channels, either in the chat or guesting on them and stuff like that. And I just love talking about football. It's just it's a passion of mine. I just love it, and I'd be lost without it. And as I said to you earlier, I was thinking we were going to have a lot of downtime now with the season ended, but sure, I haven't been as busier as I have now. I'm worried about when the season kicks off, how I'm going to fit everything in now and stuff like that. No. Set myself up for a big fall here. But yeah, if you could subscribe to the channel, it would be great. We're about, I think, 80 odd or whatever it is, 70 odd subscribers away from the magical 1,000 number. I'd love to hit that 1,000 number before the season kicks off. So anything anyone could do or your viewers could do to subscribe to it and stuff like that. And I've often said, and I don't say this lightly either, if I didn't follow Liverpool, I'd follow Arsenal. I really do love Arsenal as a club, and I love them as a football team and stuff like that. And you know, that Arsenal team in the 90s and stuff like that, and the Wenger team and stuff like that, that just reinvented football and how it should be and stuff like that, was absolutely sensational. And, you know, Dennis Bergkamp and all that, Thierry Henry, all those great players and stuff like that, Vieira, they were sensational to watch. As much as it hurt me as a Liverpool fan, you can't deny quality. If you're a football fan, you're a football fan, and recognise, you know, kings recognise kings, and it's yeah, absolutely, yeah.
It's also, it should be pointed out as well, in the late 70s, we had a team that had 7 Irishmen in it.
Yeah.
We had Pat Jennings, Sammy Nelson, Pat Rice, Liam Brady, Frank Stapleton, John Devine. Who else was there? I'm sure there was another one as well, but it was insane. The night I remember we won the cup in '79. They were driving down Islington and they had a tricolour at the front of the coach.
There you go.
Crazy.
There you go.
Yeah. Anyway, but listen, Niall, thanks ever so much for coming on. It was an absolute pleasure. I really, really enjoyed it. Thank you so much, and have a great rest of your evening, mate.
Yeah. You too, pal. Loved it. Thanks for having me on.
You're welcome. Take care, everyone. Thanks for watching. Bye for now.
You do that with footballers, like he said about Leeds. I've kept really quiet, but I'll tell you something. He went down in my estimation when he said that. We have not resorted to that, but I'll tell you, you can tell him now, be watching it, we're still fighting for this title, and he's got to go to Middlesbrough and get something. And I'll tell you, honestly, I will love it if we beat them. Love it.
Look at this, Cameron. It's a brilliant run from Messi. Can he go all the way?
Townsend right in there. Houghton also making his presence felt. There's his shot. It's a goal for Ireland. The goalkeeper caught badly out of position.
Maradona turns like a little eel and comes away from trouble. Little squat man comes inside Budger, leaves him for dead. Outside Fennick, leaves him for dead and puts the ball away. And that is why Maradona is the greatest player in the world. He buried the English defence. He picked up that ball 40 yards out. First he left one man for dead. First he went by Saxon. It's a goal of great quality by a player of the greatest quality. It's England 0, Argentina 2.
Good ball by Dixon, finding Smith. For Thomas, charging through the midfield. Thomas, it's up for grabs now. Thomas, right at the end. An unbelievable climax to the league season.
You ever gentle on my mind.
Everything they've entered this season, they have won.